What did you swear you'd never get into but now you're addicted to it? My girlfriend has always been more privileged than me, so she never knew what it was like to be flat out broke. If she needed cash, she'd just ask her parents, but I would have to look for loose change in the couch. But things quickly changed during my senior year of high school when my friend challenged my knowledge about something I was passionate about. We each put $5 and whoever was right would walk away with 10. I needed my $5 to buy lunch at school, but I was so confident that I was blindsided by the risk of me starving for the whole day. Luckily I won, and the rush that came with it was nothing short of extraordinary. I had no idea there was an easy way to get money. I thought I would be stuck with my hand digging in the couch for the rest of my life. From then on, I'd try my luck with some other friends, and my winning streak was far better than my losing streak. I was obsessed, but I could control myself. I knew when to put my money where my mouth was, because of the things we would put money on. We would bet on who could eat a pie the fastest without using their hands, who would get a girlfriend first, and have three-legged races and predict who would win. They were usually a game of chances, but I assessed the situation and got a pretty good idea of what the outcome would be, so my chances of winning were always high. Over the years though, my way of earning cash became more advanced. Instead of playing with friends, I started playing online through an app called Kulshi, because it finally became legal in the USA. It was easier to earn money that way, because I could put as much money on whatever and whenever I wanted in order to win more money. Every day I tried my luck on different things such as which team would draft Bronny James and when GTA 6 would release. These were the more riskier ones, but I made most of my money on the easier ones. Like Ozempic being prescribed for weight loss in the beginning of 2024, and Taylor Swift holding the top 10 spots on the Billboard Hot 100 with her new album. It got to the point where all the money added up and I had cash to spare. I decided to take a page out of my soon-to-be in-laws book and spoil the F out of my girlfriend. I bought her gift baskets, book series, matching sets of jewelry, and other things I knew she liked. Her smile when she received the gifts brightened my day, and that alone motivated me to continue my hobby. My life felt complete, but I was totally blindsided when my girlfriend confronted me a month later. She laid out all the gifts I got her in front of me, and asked how I could afford everything. I didn't have the balls to tell her about my hobby because she would have malfunctioned. She lived a pampered princess lifestyle, so she never had to do anything to earn money. She wouldn't have understood where I was coming from. Instead, I lied and said I was working overtime. I celebrated when she laughed it off and continued the day as usual because I thought she believed me. But the next day, I came back from work and found her packing all her clothes into her suitcase. I asked her what was happening, and in just seconds I was down on my knees begging her to not leave me. She said she knew I was a liar because I was coming home at the same time every day, so there was no way I was working overtime. She told me she was going back home to her parents because at least they trusted her. Then, she said everything was really sketchy to her, so she thought I was dealing, and that's why I couldn't tell her the truth. The final blow came when she yelled that she didn't want my gifts because they were bought with dirty money. I got back up and explained that I was going to tell her everything if she let me. She asked me if it was going to be the truth this time, and I swore that it would be. I was scared that she would judge me for my hobby, but I was more scared that she would leave me. So, I worked up the courage to show her Kulshi on my phone and explain that I was making extra money, just by making educated guesses on events I had knowledge on. She didn't say anything for a while and scrolled on the app instead. I was too nervous to even breathe because I had no idea how this would turn out. All I could do was watch her like a hawk and wait for her to make a move. But she surprised me when she made a trade on an event. There were Rotten Tomato markets, and she made an educated guess on what the score of the movie Challengers would be on the weekend of the release. She turned to face me and smiled, saying she would pay me back when she won. She then said she had seen a lot of people talking about how excited they were for the release, so she knew it would have good ratings. Even after all that, the only thing I managed to say was asking her if she was still mad at me. She said no, but I shouldn't lie to her again. After that, it became a common thing for us to use Kulshi together. She got good at it quickly, but my years of experience still made me better than her. I wasn't willing to put my money on that though, but we are going to put money on TikTok getting banned because I hate that app. I think I've destroyed my marriage. My wife refuses to see me or speak to me. I'm not even allowed to know where she is. I don't know if this goes here or not, but I made a friend, let's call him David, at the gym. We got on well and the friendship started to translate outside of just being gym buddies. We regularly hung out after work or after the gym, and it was nice having a friend I could spend time with. Almost 3 weeks ago I invited him over to my house to have dinner with me and my wife. My wife and I cooked dinner, and at some point her sister-in-law called asking if her 3-year-old son left his alligator socks at our house as he refuses to breathe until he gets it back, and he did leave it at ours. So my wife decided to drop it off. While my wife was away, David arrived. All was going well until my wife got back home and saw David. She just suddenly started screaming, and I mean she was letting out some blood-curdling screams. She was just shouting for David to get out and waving a blade around. David left and I tried to ask her what happened, but she honestly couldn't talk as it seems like she was having a stroke or a heart attack. So I called for an ambulance and she was admitted at the hospital for having a severe panic attack. She was hospitalized for 3 days and she did not speak the entire time to literally anyone. On her release date she just left and no one would tell me where she was. I've called everyone we know and no one will speak to me or tell me where she is. Then finally her sister texted me a long text that was full of expletives, but it did explain what I did wrong. David was the man who took her hostage for 9 days when she was 12 and then stalked her for 7 years until he went to prison for another crime. He was never punished for SA or for holding her hostage. I mean, my jaw fell to the ground. I knew all about this as she had told me about it from the beginning. I just don't know how I didn't recognize him. I don't know how to fix this. She just refuses to see me, speak to me, and I don't even know where she is now. What is the most traumatizing thing you have found your parents doing? I added my number to my mom's group chat and what I saw left me permanently disturbed. Yesterday my mom asked me to show her how to create a WhatsApp group on her phone. Her smartphone is brand new and she's new to smartphones. Her previous phone was only capable of doing the bare minimum when it came to communication, and she was happy with that. Well, her old phone died recently and her plan was to go back to the early 2000s and find another bare minimum phone. I decided screw that, I'm getting you a proper phone that doesn't have an annoying cartridge game ringtone whenever it's switched on. I've been teaching my mom how to use her new phone for the past 2 weeks now. She's a slow learner, but she is making progress, which brings me back to the WhatsApp group. I talked her through the process and even showed her how to add someone to the group. I suggested that she had my contact just to demonstrate how simple it was. As soon as she added me to the group, I said, "Well done, Mom," put my headphones back on, and continued my online gaming session. I must have played for over an hour without checking my phone. When I finally put my controller down, I noticed that I had 28 messages, all in my mom's group. At that moment, I realized I never exited my mom's group or showed her how to one-add me. I thought it would be funny to send a message in the group and inform my mom that I forgot to show her how to remove me. I never sent that message. I was too traumatized. It became clear to me that the purpose of the group was for my mom and her friends to share cake ideas. Specific cake ideas. Based on the messages I saw, my mom wanted a cake for my dad's upcoming birthday that looked exactly like her kitty. Not only that, she wanted the cake to be edible and somehow screwable as well. Like she literally wanted a real schlong to at least be able to penetrate the cake without destroying it. One of my mom's friends said that she knew someone who specialized in erotic cakes. Then she asked my mom if she was willing to send that person a picture of her kitty since my mom didn't want a random kitty cake. Before my mom could respond, another friend decided to share an old photo of my young mom and a few other young people who were about to go skinny dipping. Everyone in the photo was fully undressed. My mom was spreading her cheeks and mooning the photographer. The person who sent the photo said, "I hope you learned to shave over the years before you send that photo." This was like the first 6 or 7 messages in the group. There was a lot more to read, but I had seen too much, so I exited the group as quietly as possible. I have no idea how no one noticed I was there and I don't know if they noticed me leave. My mom isn't acting weird around me, even though I'm being weird as hell. I want to believe that I might be in the clear. That being said, I now know what my mom's kitty looked like when she was my age, and I now have nightmares of my soon-to-be 60-year-old dad screwing a kitty cake. My wife revealed that our daughter might not be biologically mine. Please help. My wife and I had a really huge fight, like we often do these days. We've been married for almost 9 years and have a 6-year-old daughter. During the argument, my wife said something extremely hurtful. She got so mad that she yelled at the top of her lungs, "She's not even your daughter, and he was a better F too." She being our daughter, of course. My wife's facial expression told me she immediately realized what she said. Then she claimed she was just mad and said it just to be mean, "It's not true, blah blah blah." Yet even though we have made up and things have settled since the fight, I still feel off about her one cruel comment. This made me think about when our daughter was conceived. We were having problems even back then, and we briefly separated. I started to wonder if my wife might have been with someone else during that time. Our daughter looks a lot like my wife, so it's hard to see any resemblance to anyone else. I mean, why else would she say something like that, even if it was just said out of anger? I love being a dad to our daughter, and we have a special bond. My wife has even mentioned feeling jealous of our connection, which might be why she said what she did. But her words got me thinking. If it turns out I'm not her biological father, it won't change how I feel about her. I'll still love her just the same. However, it would mean the end of our marriage. The thought of someone else having parental rights over my child is upsetting, even though I'm her legal father no matter what the DNA says. It's unlikely that someone would come forward years later to claim paternity, but it's still bothering me. I might be overthinking things, and my wife probably said those hurtful words in anger. I wish I could stop dwelling on it, but it's hard to forget such a serious accusation. My sister is dating the man that traumatized me. I had a bully named Mike in high school. He tormented me in many ways. He got physical with me, verbally bullied me as well as on social media, and spread rumors about me throughout the whole school. He took my food, my money, my books, he hurt me and left several bruises all over consistently. Mike harassed a lot of guys, but I was the only woman he harassed. But the last year of high school was the worst. Where I studied had several playgrounds and fields. It is a fairly large school, one of the 2 fields connected to a small forest that, when crossed, led to a street. No one could get in there, but they never bothered to put up a fence. Whenever I wanted to be alone or not be harassed, I went to that forest. Mike and one of his friends followed me. After taking my things, the friend took me from behind. They made me kneel and Mike took out his pee-pee and forced me to give him brain. I think I even swallowed my own vomit. Then they roped me. I never reported the incident as Mike threatened to make me pay if I did. I told my parents about Mike as well as my sister, and I hinted at the rope, but I'm not sure if they picked it up. Either way, they all knew Mike had bullied me for years and what he looked like. On to my sister. My sister has been talking for months about her new boyfriend, about how well he treats her and takes care of her, that he is very respectful towards women, that he is affectionate, that he takes her to nice places, etc. On Thursday, my sister took her boyfriend to my parents' house where she would formally introduce him to us, and when she arrived she introduced Mike. I was frozen and scared. When I saw him I was so scared I peed myself. My parents froze too. I ran up to my room and they followed me up. I had a breakdown about it there and then, and my parents forced Mike out of the house immediately and my dad threatened to do serious harm to him. They had a sit-down talk with my sister, and told her she is extremely selfish and inconsiderate. My sister blew up, and called me selfish and said I'm being stuck in the past and told me people can change. She eventually left the house to go stay with Mike and is yet to come home. I'm pretty sure I traumatized a home invader. I want to start this off by saying this had to have literally happened in 3 minutes or less. When I was in high school, I was often home alone and unattended, relatively good neighborhood, nothing to genuinely fear, so I would spend from around 4:30 to 9 o'clock completely alone in a decent-sized house. It wasn't necessarily scary, but just sort of eerie to me. One night though, there was a break-in. It wasn't anything really scary, because I was down in the basement and just heard the dude break in the screen door and start rummaging through the kitchen. Now, at the time, I myself did not have a personal phone, and the landline is in said kitchen. Due to me being in the basement, I did have my dad's axe to my immediate disposal, but I was not some 6 feet 4 inches man giant. I was a 5 feet 8 inches dude who barely even did PE, so what did I do? I decided to effing throw it at him. I carried the weighty thing up the stairs as quiet as I could, and managed to get the door open enough to slip out with it. I sort of walked into angle, screamed at the top of my lungs, and just effing hurled it at the guy. I missed, but I genuinely think the poor dude pissed himself before he made a beeline for the screen door he'd shattered. The blade didn't hit anything, but dented the wall pretty bad. I eventually called the cops, then my parents. If you robbed a house in Alabama and had an axe nearly embedded in your head, I sincerely do apologize. Hope you did reconsider some decisions though.
Would 12-year-old you'd never believe about adult you. For almost 9 years, I've worked literally 1 minute away from a huge water park and I've never gone there. That I do math for a living. Fucking math. He'd have been so upset. We never got that growth spurt we were promised. That sometimes, when I'm not paying attention, my mom's words slipped right out of my mouth. That, I too, don't know what the fuck I'm doing with my life. That I'm almost 40 and still don't have a stable full of horses. I live in a whole ass other country and speak another language now. That definitely would have come as a surprise. That I own an ice cream shop. I actually like exercise and physical activity, it's just PE class that sucked.
I caught my priest cheating on his wife, so I blackmailed him. My entire life I've always known that church was total bullshit, and that anyone who worked for a church was nothing but a manipulative con artist. I'm 17 years old and my family has been going to church since I was a kid. My parents are super strict about our religion and I've hated every part of the church ever since I first stepped inside the goddamn building. It always felt so fake and dramatic to me. I hated the priests, I hated how they made us feel ashamed for simply existing, and when I got older I realized just how money hungry and greedy our church is. I remember asking my mom what the donation basket once was when I was a kid, and I asked her why we were giving the church money when they were supposed to take care of us. My mom told me that was a sinful question and to trust in our faith. Anyway, even though I'll be a legal adult in a couple months, my parents still drag me to church every Sunday even though I can't stand it. I knew it was a load of crap but I didn't realize just how dirty the church staff was until this past weekend. My parents had signed me up to help clean up after a big church event, and I was staying later after everyone had left, so put away the chairs. I thought I was the only person in the building other than the pastor, but I quickly learned we were not the only ones there. Now for context, my pastor is a married man who gives weekly sermons about abstinence and the evils of abortion. I've always known he was a real piece of poop, but I couldn't have never guessed just how effed up he really was. After I was done putting away the last row of chairs, and I went to the pastor's office to let him know I was all finished. When I opened the door, I found my pastor with his pants down, and one of my classmates from school bent over his desk. Her pants were also down. They both looked at me as my jaw hit the floor. All I said was what the F, before I ran straight out of the church. Somehow, my pastor managed to get my cell number, I guess from my family's records. He called me an hour after I left the church that night, and begged me not to tell anyone, especially his wife. He said that his wife was a good woman and she didn't deserve to hear about this. I was grossed out by him but not surprised. I had known he was nothing but a joke for years now. Before I responded to him on the phone, an idea popped into my head and I thought of the overflowing donation basket from his precious little church. I told him on the phone that I wanted him to donate all the donation money from the past year to a local homeless shelter, and that if he did I would keep his secret. He started crying on the phone, thanking me like an idiot. I told him that I would go to the shelter myself in a week to check that he went through with it. I was cackling so hard to myself when I hung up the phone that night, knowing damn well I was going to tell everyone at church the second after he donated the money. I can't wait to give that greedy, cheating, predatory bastard some well-deserved karma, while also doing some good along the way.
Therapists that have cried in a session. Why? Had a sweet little boy tell me about the death of his dad, who was his little league coach, tragically died the week of the big championship game. He went ahead and played the game the day before the funeral. He hit a home run and shared tearfully how the next day, he put the baseball in his dad's coffin at the funeral, with his team all standing around him in support. Therapist here. I've gotten misty-eyed a number of times, but only outright had tears fall once. My client was very vividly describing the week her newborn daughter spent in the NICU, ending with the day that they knew she would pass. She told me what it was like to hold her baby as she died in her arms. The feeling of grief that filled the air was just too much for me to hold in, so of course a few quiet tears rolled out of my eyes. Client who lost her husband talking about how due to a miscommunication at the hospital she thought she'd have time to say goodbye before he passed away, taken off ventilator, but when she came back into the room he had died and she wasn't there for him dying. Everyone got to say goodbye except her. She loved him so much and it totally broke my heart. All of her story was so sad, so this was icing on the cake really.
I asked to cut ties with my mom for her inappropriate behavior involving my soon-to-be ex-boyfriend. I, 29F, Recently went on a 3-day road trip with my boyfriend, 30M, mother, 49F, and close friend, 30F. My mom and boyfriend had just recently reconnected after almost 1 year of not speaking to each other. Boyfriend's fault. Boyfriend is very excited about this trip cause he loves/likes my mom so much. As the trip is 8 hours long to get to our first destination, we discussed so many things during the drive. My mom and boyfriend were slowly returning to their old usual banters, which really made me happy. At one point, the conversation turned so personal as we started discussing about our intimacy lives. I'm very open with my mom and we are constantly working on our relationship. I grew up with my grandparents and had only been with my mom since I was 20 years/0, so we are different in many ways. I guess the conversation made everyone so comfortable and relaxed with one another that my boyfriend started making sexual jokes towards my mom. I was awkwardly laughing at first, but when he suggested that they, boyfriend and mom, should spoon later at night, I spoke up and said that the joke made me uncomfortable and it's not something he should be telling my mom. To my surprise, my mom clarified that she is okay with the jokes and she does not see any malice with them. There was an earlier comment that he made to which I slapped his arm and told him to stop. That night my boyfriend and I got into an argument as he was trying to dismiss my feelings and told me I should go see a doctor. When I asked him if the roles were reversed and I asked his dad to spoon, would he be okay? That's when he said he's sorry and promised not to cross that line again. Fast forward to the end of our trip. I was so frustrated at everyone and decided to put my noise-canceling headphones on to try and sleep. I woke up 1 hour later and reduced the volume of the music playing. They all thought I continued sleeping and that's when I heard them, my mom, boyfriend and close friend, talking about their sexual fantasies. I was fuming and trying so hard to hold myself back. We stopped at a gas station cause they were getting hungry, and when they all went out from the car I was trying to compose myself, but my mom came back to ask me to come eat and I just lost it. My boyfriend and close friend came back to the car as I was full on screaming at this point. I unloaded every single sentiment I felt towards her about not having my back and her behavior. I was so angry that I told her we should just end our relationship cause we are so toxic. I always find myself swallowing words from her that are too painful, and I guess so is she. She said she was sorry and that I misunderstood their conversation. I felt like I was being gaslighted. My boyfriend apologized to everyone and mentioned that I asked him not to get into sexual topics with my mom, but he got carried away. My mom mentioned that she was a BD mother and I agreed out of anger. We were crying the whole ride back until we went our separate ways.
6 months later, divorcing my husband was the biggest mistake of my life. If I could give anyone a piece of advice for divorce, it would be to not do it under normal circumstances. If your spouse is beating you or threatening you or your children, then, of course, get out and fast. In my case, there was no abuse. We were together for 8 years that was mostly good, and we have 4 kids. Right around 5 years, I got a promotion at work, and I got it in my head that my ex-husband was dragging me down, or at least holding me back from more success and a better life. We never had a lot of money, but with my promotion, I was now making more than he was. I started working longer hours, and at the same time, his hours were cut, so he was at home more. I really began to resent him because he was home and because he got to spend time with our kids. Most nights when I got home, they were already getting ready for bed, if not already sleeping. After a few months of my new job, it was clear to me that things were not going well at home without me there. Some nights the dishes weren't done when I got home, or the kids had not eaten, or whatever else I could think of to be mad at him about. It really didn't matter. He kept saying that he would try harder, but that it was hard being home all the time. That always made me really mad. For the next couple years, things kept getting worse. My hours weren't any shorter, and his were on and off full-time. There was no convenient time for him to be working full-time because of my hours, but we also needed the money. Whenever he would tell me that he could get extra hours, I would always complain, and the less hours he worked, the more I complained that he wasn't bringing in enough money. Whenever he brought up the contradiction, I would tell him that he needed to figure it out. I knew that it would bother him, so I started saying that a lot and for everything that I could. I really started to resent him, and I pulled away from him. I knew that it was hurting him, but I didn't care. If he didn't want to be hurt, then he would at least try to make me happy. I used that same thing to justify when I started to talk to another guy at work. I thought he was just a friend, but talking at work turned into texting at home, and then pictures and videos, and then trying to sneak some alone time with him. I knew that it was wrong, but it made me feel so alive, and my husband had not made me feel like that in years. I was tired of being unhappy, and I was doing this for me. The worst was the night that I came home at a reasonable time and found that he had cleaned the whole house, cooked the whole family dinner, and picked out a movie for all of us to watch together. This would have made me swoon a couple years earlier, but that night I couldn't even look at him and I pretended to be sick. I spent the rest of the night in bed while he waited on me and checked on me and even made me different food and brought it to me in bed. It made me feel terrible, and then it made me angry that he made me feel that way, and by the end of the night, I was texting with the other guy. Over the next month or two from that night, it did not matter what he did. He was wrong just for breathing most days. He would get so upset with how I was treating him, and I would just wait and egg him on into losing it because I knew it would happen eventually. After most of the fights we had, he would apologize for whatever I told him he did wrong if there even was something, but I never did. I would usually find a way to make him feel even worse. I knew that I was right because he was wrong, and that was all that mattered to me. I even pretended that I didn't care when he found out about my relationship with the guy from work. It really destroyed me inside to see him holding back tears, but I wasn't going to let him see that. He was at his weakest, and that was when I chose to tell him that I wanted a divorce. I could almost hear his heart shattering inside his chest. He talked and fought and said that we could work through it together. I really wasn't interested in fixing our marriage, but I mostly ended things with the other guy, but only because I knew I could get it back if I wanted it. I could see that he was trying, and occasionally I would let him know. But for the most part, I kept being a huge bitch to him for any and all reasons that I could think of. I'm not sure how much more the man could have done to make me happy besides finding a job that paid enough for me to not have to work at all. He said that he was looking, but looking and finding are two different things. It was around this time that I discovered this group and a few others. I started posting things about him from my perspective only, and I got so much positive feedback for how I was feeling that I knew I was right. The more I posted, the more validation that I got. It wasn't just me who knew that ex-husband wasn't worth keeping around. I had the whole internet telling me how terrible he is. I started saying awful things to him and even outright ignoring him. I was so confident with mine and everyone else's opinion that I contacted a lawyer and within a couple weeks had filed for divorce. I continued to use this site and a couple others to validate my feelings and for encouragement to go through with it, and finally it was done. It went pretty smoothly. Ex-husband didn't ask for much besides to not get divorced and to try to work it all out. I didn't care about that though. He was broken, but I was free. I could do whatever I wanted without having to feel any guilt or answer to anybody. It was an amazing feeling of freedom. It didn't last long though. In the first month after he moved out, I missed garbage day 3 times. There was also rarely a single clean dish, and the laundry sat in piles so long that I had to start doing the sniff test to see if it could be worn again. I also never saw my kids more miserable. My oldest had seen some of the messages from the other guy months earlier, and she knew that ex-husband still wanted to try to work it out. It didn't take her long to stop talking to me at all, except to say that she wanted to go to ex-husband house. The others all told me that they wanted to live with ex-husband too. I did my best to try to make them happy, but I ended up just buying them toys all the time, and the happiness only lasted minutes. I also was having a lot of trouble with work. Being alone, I couldn't work all those extra hours that I was expected to. I finally gave in and started calling ex-husband to watch the kids. He would always come over as soon as he could, and he always asked me if I needed anything. When I would get home, I would find clean dishes and laundry and even dinner sometimes. He would never say too much after I got home. He would just say to call him if I needed anything and leave. One night he took out the garbage and brought it to the curb because it was garbage night, and I forgot again. He always looked so sad when it was time to go. Finally, after a couple months, my friends convinced me to go out on a date. It was for dinner and a movie, and I was excited and hopeful, but at dinner I started getting a feeling of overwhelming guilt. It got so bad that I ended up not even going to the movie. A week and about 1,000,000 tears later, I was on a therapist's couch. I told her everything that had happened, starting with the promotion that I got at work. She did not agree with me or with any of the encouragement to divorce that I got. I ended up in her office 2 and sometimes 3 times a week, and the more that I talked to prove that I was right, the more that I started to see how wrong I was. It was truly heartbreaking. I don't know if I cried as much in my whole life as I did in the first month in her office. After about $2,000 of therapy sessions, I learned that my ex-husband had his faults, but I figured out that mine were so much worse. I did so many awful things and said awful things that I wouldn't want to be with me, but he did. I still remember him asking me in the meeting with the lawyer to please not go through with it. I did go through with it though, and then later I bragged on here how great it felt. I was so wrong, and now I can see it. A couple weeks ago, I went outside with him when he was leaving the house. I asked him about getting back together. When he looked at me, his eyes were full of tears, and a couple went down his cheeks. He told me that he didn't know if he could. He said that the pain has been too much for too long, and that if we got back together, that I might just turn around and do it to him again. He said that he always thought that I would realize how much he loved me and stop up until I signed the divorce papers and let out a big, over-exaggerated sigh of relief. He said that hurt him more than anything else, and that he doesn't know if he can ever trust me again. I don't blame him. I destroyed a man who, looking back, was a great husband. I deprived my kids of having a a great father in the house with them, and I took his kids away from him. And me, the one who pushed for the divorce expecting happiness and a life of freedom, spend all my free time sitting at home or sitting on a therapist's couch.
Change my view. There is nothing a man can do to protect himself from false rope/intimate assault allegations. I can think of two types of false rope allegations: malicious allegations. These are situations where a woman knows she wasn't roped, but makes the accusation as some type of vendetta against the man, or to protect herself from ridicule or negativity. Then there's mistaken allegations. These are situations where the woman fully believes she was roped, but the situation that occurred does not meet the legal definition of rope. Legally, she validly consented to intimacy, even if she regretted granting that consent later. For malicious allegations, there is essentially nothing a man can do to protect himself. Even avoiding intimacy altogether doesn't protect against malicious allegations. Some malicious allegations could be avoided by making specific efforts to not piss women off, but that does little for, say, a situation where a woman falsely claims rope because she doesn't want her parents to know she consented to intimacy. Mistaken allegations provide for more avenues of protection for men, but at some point you just have to take your partner at their word that they are consenting to the intimacy and are consenting for the right reasons. So repeatedly checking in and reading body language is really the best protection for men attempting to avoid mistaken false allegations. But if your partner is telling you that they want to have intimacy, either with words or actions, when they really don't want to have intimacy, what is a man to do? It's reasonable to take her at her word, but you never really know if she's consenting because she wants intimacy, or if it's because she is afraid of what you'll do if she says no, or because she had a couple glasses of wine, or because she thinks it means you'll be her boyfriend. And if it turns out to be some reason other than that she actually wanted to have intimacy, the man is at risk of being falsely accused. Note that the examples I provided above as protections a man can take to avoid false rope allegations fall within the little a man can do. So responses of "look at your own post, there are lots of things a man can do" won't sway my opinion. What is the most fetid smell you have experienced? I worked for Walmart for a summer in college. On my very first day, there was a weekly employee meeting, where all the employees gathered in the hallway. I stayed towards the back, being the new guy and all. Midway through the meeting, an ancient old lady showed up, hunched over and shuffling behind her cart. She approached me and loudly asked me, "Where's the bathroom?" I pointed across the gathering at the bathroom down the hallway. She shuffled past me, and it hit me. The smell, oh my god, the smell. It was a mixture of hot porta potty, roadkill and burnt hair. It was viscous, like opening a trash can filled with rotting possums on a sweltering summer day. I couldn't just not smell it by not breathing. It forced itself upon my nostrils, and this category 5 shit wind was heading for the heart of the Walmart employee powwow. I was preoccupied trying to restrain my gag reflex, and before I could warn my new colleagues, she had already reached the center of the room. The eye wall of hurricane stank had made landfall. I could see everyone in the vicinity turn visibly green as they comprehended the rotten misfortune that had befallen them. As the door to the women's room closed with a gentle thud, the entire room erupted in unfettered gagging. One lady puked in the water fountain, another in a trash can. Since I had weathered the storm already and had a chance to recover, I stood at the back of the crowd and beheld the sight. A masterful mass crop dusting, the likes of which I may never witness again. Bravo, old lady. I can only imagine you sold your ass to the devil. What a hell of a welcome to Walmart. I went to a pride event as a straight white man. I am a straight white man with a bisexual girlfriend. I've been trying to expand my horizons a bit over the past few years, and she asked me to go to a drag show with her. Against my typical nature, I said yes. It was the most fun I've had in ages. It was packed elbow to elbow. I didn't see a single fight. Someone bumped me and I dropped my drink on the foot of a drunk person. I apologized, and the drama was immediately over with no hard feelings. No one got in a fight. The show was really funny. The drag queen announcer had me cracking up when they were dogging on people in the crowd and making people who were there for their birthday dance on the stage. Everyone was dressed up in pride costumes and genuinely looked like they were having a great time and wanted to be there. My favorite part was when a 68-year-old lady got a dance from a male stripper and the dude smiled huge and gave her a big hug and kiss on the cheek. She looked like my grandma, and she walked out on the stage for her birthday walk/dance, and the crowd went absolutely berserk cheering for her, and I'll be she'd never had that entire type of attention her whole life. Come on, straight white people. These are the people we call pedophiles? These are the people we are scared of being nearing children? Give me a flocking break. I have never seen such a drunk, densely packed large crowd of people so nice to one another, so nice to me, and having such a positive and accepting towards anyone, even white as straight me. It didn't turn me gay either. As it turns out, the gay is not contagious, but it's got me thinking maybe if it did, that wouldn't be that a bad thing to be a member of the least toxic community I've seen in years. As a country we can do better. I'm going next year. I don't vote conservative, but they have at least one white, rural male that will never vote to take away rights, status, or protection.
How do you know you're attractive? I have autism and ADHD, and still date attractive women despite having zero game and blowing their ears off with stupid facts about my boring hobbies. Because I get ads saying there are attractive singles in my area. There's no one for miles, so I've concluded that I'm the attractive single. You know you're ugly if you call yourself ugly and nobody corrects you. People treat you differently. When I was young I was probably a 9.5. Everyone was super nice, kind and went out of their way for me. With age and health issues I am barely a 6 these days, and I became invisible to others.
My boyfriend and our circle of friends pranked me on my birthday, and I ghosted them because of it. I, 27 male, met my, probably soon to be ex, boyfriend Alex, 29 male, 2 years ago through a mutual friend of ours. I never expected he'd be interested in me because, when I first met him, he had only been with women. He came out as bi to me and our friends not too long after that, and that same night, he hinted that he was into me. We got to know each other more and it eventually turned into the two of us dating. He's genuinely a sweet and awesome guy, quite introverted but has a big heart and a real geek about the things he likes. I thought he'd be the one I would be marrying and all that, but I'm thinking that's not going to happen anymore. Last Monday was my birthday, and I went home early from work so that Alex and I can go out and enjoy ourselves. I told him earlier that day that I would go home early. When I opened the door, I was greeted by him laying on our couch, while a woman I didn't know was on top of him. They were fully clothed by the way. I was basically paralyzed and couldn't react at all. He eventually saw me and had a surprised look on his face, but he also looked like he was trying to hold his laugh in. The woman also looked like she was about to laugh as well. I also started to hear chatter from the kitchen and in our bedroom. Alex then shouted, "You guys can come out." And so our friends came out of our bedroom and kitchen, holding gifts, party poppers, and a cake. I guess them shouting it's a prank. Happy birthday. While turning the party poppers on snapped me back to reality because after they said that, I just quietly turned around and left. I didn't see their reactions when I did that, but I could hear them saying, "Oh crap and wait," and some other things I can't remember. When I heard them try to follow me, I hastened my pace until I reached my car and drove away. While driving, my phone started to get bombarded by texts, calls, and messages from my boyfriend and our friends. When it got too distracting, I just turned off my phone and went to a hotel that's far enough from my place. By the time I got to my hotel room, I just started sobbing on the floor. I think I blacked out from crying because when I woke up, it was already sunny outside. I made sure to tell my team leader first that I would be absent for a few days due to an emergency, and she was kind enough to accept my request. She probably noticed something was off with me because I was sniffling and my voice sounded weak. Right now, I plan on telling my aunt who lives near my area about what happened, and asking if I could live with her for a couple of days until I sort out my mind and know what I have to do next. I'm deeply heartbroken because I've told my boyfriend and my friends before how I felt about cheating and how it essentially ruined my family growing up in my young mind back then. My mom cheated on my dad and it broke our family, and I got cheated on by my first boyfriend, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like I overreacted and that I should have just went with it all. I still don't plan on opening my phone, so I'm using my laptop right now to type this. I don't know how to face and respond to them after all that has happened. Maybe some time away from them will help, I hope. Have you ever seen a student roast a teacher to the point they don't know what to say? There was this guy in my school, we were 17 and were in arguably the best school in the country, who used to sleep through every class he took. At first, all the teachers ignored him but one particular math teacher got pissed and decided to make an example of him. She prepared a very difficult math question. Singapore topped the PISA International Math exam, so difficult means really difficult and way above our syllabus level, and wrote it on the board, then asked the person next to him to wake him up to answer the question. Not the actual guy. The sleepy guy yawned and then took a look at the board. He kept still and quiet for 10 seconds and the teacher started to go into a lecture about paying attention in class blah blah blah, when the guy interrupted and just stated the answer without working out anything on paper. The teacher, who herself was a top scholar and had an advanced math degree from MIT, was flabbergasted as she expected a brilliant person to have needed at least half a page of calculations to arrive at the answer. She recovered quickly and she then asked the sleepy guy if he had any questions on classwork. Big mistake. The sleepy guy had a question and walked up to the board, wrote a question down and said he had trouble solving the equation. The whole class was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Needless to say, 45 minutes later, the teacher had still not managed to solve the equation. Priceless. After extensive tests covering numerous math topics, the sleepy guy was then given a dispensation by the school for all math classes during his time there. He eventually got a full scholarship to Princeton. I told my wife that is not happening. TLDR, my wife wants to give our child a ridiculous name. Me and my wife are having our first child together. She is currently 9 months pregnant and could give birth anytime in the next couple of weeks. The only major fight we have had throughout her pregnancy happened a couple days ago, and it was about what we were going to name our kid. It all started when we found out the gender of the baby. We didn't do a gender reveal and decided to find out the gender at one of her checkups because we didn't want to spend time making 2 lists of names then have to get rid of one after. So after we found out we were having a boy, we sat down together and made a list. Almost all of the names she suggested were normal, until the one that caused me to write this post. She suggested we name our son Mune. She told me the name was from this movie she watched when she was younger and that it always stuck with her. I told her the name was a little out there and he would get made fun of for it. She claimed he wouldn't and we started going back and forth trying to decide whether to add the name to the list or not. Eventually she agreed to keep the name off the list. We picked some that we liked, and I thought that was that. Later on in her pregnancy her mom decided to throw a baby shower as it was her first grandchild, and my wife's pregnancy was almost over and we had not celebrated once. It was fine for the most part until we started to open the gifts. Most of them were normal baby things like diapers and bottles, until we got to her mom's gift. My wife opened the gift bag and pulled out a blue handmade blanket. It seemed normal enough at first until my wife unfolded it and lo and behold there was the name Mune written on the blanket. When I saw it I was pissed but didn't want to cause a scene so I stayed quiet. After that reveal I had family members come up to me and ask me about the name and why I hadn't told them. I didn't know what to tell them as I didn't have a clue about this either and just had to embarrassingly tell my family that, which pissed me off even more. Once the event ended and me and my wife went home I started to question her about the name. She got defensive and told me that it was a good name and that I was overreacting about it. I brought up the earlier points and told her it was a stupid name for a kid, and if she wanted to name something Mune so bad she could use the name for a dog. She got upset and called her mom to come get her. After she left, she called me and told me she wouldn't be coming back for a while. Everyone I've talked to about this has said I'm not the asshole, but now that my wife has been gone and I've been thinking about it, I feel like I could have handled the situation better. Am I the a-hole?
Parents of Reddit, what are some of the strangest things you have heard your children say while gaming? My nephew, when we play games together, likes to randomly make jokes about how good my mom is. He's 11, I am mortified every time. My 6-year-old at the time was playing a Super Mario game, her favorite. Suddenly I hear, "Get down the hole you little bit." I had to be the parent, but inside I was dying of laughter. One time when my brother was like 9, he came out of his room absolutely fuming because someone called him a furry on Roblox. My 17-year-old came into my room while his girlfriend was over. He says, "Hey, if you hear loud noises coming out of my room, we're not up to anything, we're just playing this weird Sonic game."
I caught my husband doing something disturbing. Now he's gaslighting me. My marriage has become a complete mess in the span of only a couple of weeks, and I can't believe how much my husband has hidden from me, although we've been married almost 10 years now. My husband and I were both born and raised in the church, we both came from strong Christian families, and we are both passionate about our faith. My husband is a bit more devoted to the church than me, and for the 15 years I've known him, I have never seen him miss church even once. We don't have the most expressive marriage, I should say. We're both private people and neither of us is very emotional, so we have separate lives to some degree. We tried having children, but we had a lot of issues, mostly from my husband's side. My life is sort of dull, but it's fine, I guess, or at least I thought it was. It all started the other day. I hadn't been feeling well the night before, and I had been in and out of sleep all night. In the morning, I was still lying in bed, just trying to rest with my eyes closed when I heard my husband wake up. A couple minutes later, I opened my eyes a bit. I saw he was watching something on his phone, but when my eyes focused, I had to keep myself from gasping out loud. Sure enough, there was my Christian husband watching some sort of gay adult films on his phone at 9 in the morning, while lying next to me in bed. I guess he thought I was still asleep because he had headphones in and was attempting to tilt the screen away from me, but I still saw it clearly. I had no idea what to do. I didn't want to believe it, so I shut my eyes again. I waited, but a couple minutes later I gave into curiosity and once again opened my eyes to see my husband not only watching the video but now he was touching himself. I closed my eyes and pretended to stir in my sleep just to make him stop. He left for work, and I stayed home since I was feeling worse than ever, but I spent the whole day freaking out about what I saw, and I knew I needed to confront him. We never really had difficult or uncomfortable conversations in our marriage, and before this, it had been pretty uneventful. So when he got home, and I asked to speak to him about something important, he didn't even look up from his dinner as he gave me a grunt. I didn't want to beat around the bush, I just came out and asked if he had been watching gay adult films. He dropped his fork and looked up at me as his brow furrowed. The first thing that came out of his mouth was a nervous laugh, but then he cleared his throat and began eating again. He mumbled to me with a mouthful of food that I was being ridiculous. I told him I had seen it myself, and he swallowed. He finally looked me in the eyes and called me a fool for accusing him of something so disgusting. Then he just started spitting out quotes in the Bible about homosexuality, and telling me how vile and disgusting those people were. He went on and on. Every time I would try to respond he would just start with another quote, like he had all the quotes of homosexuality memorized. I never knew there were so many. When he was finally done talking, he threw his dishes into the sink and slammed doors for the rest of the night. I had never seen him have such an emotional response, and it was only making me more suspicious. I'm livid that he would try and make me think I imagined what I saw, and I'm planning to go through his phone because he's making me feel crazy. I caught my husband doing something disturbing. Now he's gaslighting me. In my first post, I talked about how I saw my ultra-religious husband watching gay adult films when he thought I was asleep. When I tried to confront him about what I saw, he denied it all and called me crazy, and quoted every verse in the Bible against homosexuality. It was a strange, disheartening conversation. My husband and I have never had the warmest, closest marriage, but I never thought he was hiding something as huge as being secretly gay. Anyway, the days after the weird conversation my husband was more cold to me than usual. He stayed late at work and stopped eating dinner with me. I thought it was pretty mean, drastic behavior. My suspicions of him only grew as the days went by, and finally, he came home from the gym one day after a long workout and took a 6-hour nap on the couch. I knew this was my opportunity to go through his phone. I was as quiet and gentle as a mouse as I used his finger to unlock his phone, and my heart was racing as I clicked into his browser history. I guess a part of me hoped it wasn't true, that I had imagined it somehow, but there was the evidence staring me right in the face. Pages and pages, even bookmarks of gay adult films from dozens of sites. It was repulsive. He obviously had the habit for a while, and I found myself looking to see if he had any straight adult films saved, but I couldn't find even a single video. It was so upsetting. I did love my husband in some way, and as I put his phone down, I thought about what this meant for our marriage. I didn't want to live a lie, and I was only getting more upset as I thought about it. So after my husband woke up and took a shower, I told him we needed to talk again. He tried to talk over me again and said if I was going to keep up with all this gay stuff, I might as well shut it. Instead of accusing him or anything directly, I started listening to titles of the gay adult film sites I had found on his phone. He tried to talk over me and call me delusional and a sinner, but I just kept talking without trying to be louder than him. Eventually, he literally started angry, crying, and screaming at me that if I wanted the truth so badly he would give it to me. He was upset, but he managed to calm down a bit and explain to me that he was a straight man, he just liked gay adult films. He said he wasn't some sissy who likes boys, and that he was a proud traditional man of God. His voice was shaking while he spoke, which I had never heard before. It was so strange, I had never heard him sound so defensive. He just kept saying I'm straight. Eventually it was like he was saying it out loud just to try and convince himself instead of me. I let him talk for a while, and when things finally fell silent, all I said was that, if this was who he was, we really shouldn't be married. That's when he lost his mind. He stood up and started screeching at me at the top of his lungs. He screamed at me to stop calling him a FG, and that I couldn't talk to my husband that way. He kept getting angrier and angrier. He even threw his phone at the wall and made a hole, as well as breaking his phone screen. At this point, he was scaring me. I didn't know what else to do but apologize. It's been a couple of days since then, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells whenever I'm around him. I feel trapped in a loveless marriage with a gay man in self-denial, and I have no idea what to do.
How do I tell someone they're stinky? I think the love of my life doesn't know how to use soap. I just separated from my husband after years of a dead bedroom. I reconnected with an ex from my first year of college and he is sweet, kind, and very intimately attentive, which is refreshing. I should be happy, but he smells so badly. We just took a week-long trip together. We live in different places for now. I noticed that his breath was bad enough that it made kissing him unpleasant unless it was in the tiny window after brushing his teeth but before breakfast, or right at bedtime, when unfortunately the other issue of his body odor was at his worst. I tried offering him mints and gum as the days went, which he'd accept maybe 1/3 of the time. I brush my teeth or at least use mouthwash after every meal and made a point of doing so around him, but he occasionally would only brush his teeth once a day. He also revealed that he hadn't been to a dentist in years despite having good dental coverage, and I am sure something is wrong here. He wondered why I wasn't enjoying kissing him, and apart from a moment when we had just eaten a garlic-heavy meal, I was too anxious to tell him that he just has awful breath. Beyond the breath, he has awful body odor. On the first day I thought he just was sweaty from traveling, but I realized after watching him dress in the morning that he doesn't wear deodorant. Additionally, we'd do sweaty activities all day together and he wouldn't shower at bedtime. He would just shower once in the morning, and at this point I'd be holding my breath during intimacy. I also made a point of trying to invite him into the shower with me, while he was trying to discourage me from showering more than once so we could just have intimacy already, and told him that I'm much more comfortable having intimacy when clean and that I really prefer to shower before getting into bed at all because it keeps the sheets clean and refreshing, but he didn't get the hint. I'm supposed to see him again in 2 weeks. How can I tell him he needs to clean up without hurting his feelings? My daughter accepted money to keep her mother's affair a secret. I got my childhood sweetheart pregnant and had my daughter well into our marriage. She was considered a miracle child because the pregnancy was so difficult for my wife that she was never able to have kids again. It sucked, but it worked out perfectly in the end because my daughter was incredible. Now 2023 comes, my wife cheated on me with a friend of hers, which I discovered by signing into her Facebook. I'm saying this out of pure hatred, but he was an ugly beach. He only had one thing, and that was money. I immediately called my daughter and persuaded her to come to our house as it was urgent. She was nervous, which was quite strange, but now looking back, I'm assuming my wife found out I knew about the affair somehow and told her. She arrived at our house and I confronted my wife and she didn't deny anything. In fact, she scolded me for having no affection for her and lacking intimacy. To be honest, she was right, but I was trying to achieve our goal, early retirement. My daughter could have kept quiet, but she scolded my wife for cheating and called her a WHRE. While she isn't wrong, it caused my wife to expose her. My wife stated that she's had an affair since the pandemic ended and my daughter discovered. My wife's affair partner gave her lots of money to keep her quiet. She tried apologizing, but it wasn't enough. I was heartbroken. My daughter meant everything to me and my wife destroyed me. So I just left the house, waited for nightfall, ignored every phone call from my daughter and came back. I packed up my clothes and left. I expected my wife to be home, but she went out to be with her affair partner. Now while I have lost my family, I still have my wife's share of our early retirement which she can't get her hands on, so I now have lots of money to splash and I guess I can try to start all over. I have also blocked my daughter and my wife. I don't want any association with them. Update: I talked to my parents about the situation and they suggested I should hear my daughter out. While I was reluctant at first, I wanted closure. I wanted to understand why she betrayed me. So I unblocked her contact and I messaged her to meet her at Starbucks just to talk. She tried calling me but I refused to answer. I just wanted to meet her potentially for the last time. The next day, we met up and she tried hugging me but I refused, although I did want to initially. When we sat down, I went straight to business and asked why she was protecting her mom's affair. She replied, "I don't know," but I said to her, "You know why, but you refused to admit it," and she finally cracked. She admitted that when her mom met her affair partner, she was struggling financially due to university. When she discovered the affair, she was going to tell me, but the affair partner told her to keep her mouth shut in exchange for money. With the money that he gave, she was in a better situation financially and mentally. At that point I got pissed. She treated him like some sort of saint, some sort of hero, so I broke down in Starbucks. I asked her why she didn't ask me for help and she was speechless. She asked me if we could ever have a relationship and I said not for a long time. I don't think I can ever trust her again. Before I left my house, I took a picture frame of me and my daughter when she was younger, as a reminder of the good days, and I gave it back to her. She started breaking down instantly. My car just got stolen. I think the robbers effed in the back. I live in a normally safe suburb 20 minutes outside of DC. I didn't get out of the office until 8 p.m. last night, amounting to what was already a 50-hour work week. I went straight to the gym afterwards. I finally get home around 10-ish, and at this point I'm running on fumes. I get home and park in the driveway. Rather than being in the moment, I am thinking about sleeping and working tomorrow. I immediately shower and hop in bed. I'm awoken, still very groggy, at 5:30 a.m. by my mother saying the cars are missing. Not just one car, but cars. I go outside and they're missing. I then have the realization that I'm effing idiot. I left my keys in the car. What I didn't know is that my mom likes to keep her service key in my car in the circumstance that her car fob dies. At this point I conclude the cars were jacked. I call the cops and give them the whole rundown. Things aren't looking great. My car insurance provider could consider this negligence and deny the claim for my car. At this point I'm panicking. Part of the police report procedure in the case of a car theft is recalling what belongings were in the car. I go down the list and finally think of my AirPods. At that moment I hop on Find My iPhone and scroll through my device and see the headphones pinging in Anacostia, which is about 45 minutes away from where I live. Thank God, we have a lead. Since I'm dealing with cops in a different jurisdiction, I have to wait for the police report to be relayed. A determined sounding detective reaches out to me. I pass on the address that the AirPods are pinging from. Good news, around 1:30 I am notified that my mother's vehicle has been found. The bad news? The jackers already managed to crash the car and were seemingly getting ready to salvage it for parts. More bad news, there is no sign of my car and my AirPods are no longer pinging. I insisted to the detective that the car may very well still be around. Somewhere in that neighborhood. The dispatched police find my car 30 minutes later tucked in an alleyway seemingly unscathed on the exterior. I'm in disbelief that they were able to locate the vehicles. I hop in an Uber and head to the scene to recover my car. Unfortunately, my car is littered with ash and smells like Newports and 420. I look in the back seat and find not one, not two, but 3 used rubbers. I got the cars back, but I am now left wondering if these thieves had an orgy in my car. One little bit of good news, I had maybe 30 miles in my tank when my car was stolen, but came back to a full tank.
I think he is cheating on me, but I am not sure. My boyfriend, 19, and me, 16, we both started dating a month back. My first relationship, we met online through a mutual friend. In the start we were so in love, like he was the most green-flagged man, kind, and he is very pretty, but gradually I could feel him losing interest in me. I tried to communicate 2 times, but both times my worries were dismissed, and he told me this is why he didn't want to start dating again. That reasoning bugged me, since if he didn't want to date, then why say yes to me? But anyways, after the second time we started talking more often again, but I noticed a change of pattern in our texts. I have always asked him so many questions, but he has only a few words, 1 sentence at max to say. Sometimes without studies or anything he leaves me undelivered for 6-8 hours. Yesterday I uploaded some pics of myself and tagged him. Although he didn't repost them, he told me he wouldn't because men from his profile might hit me up, which I didn't mind from his side. Today I took pics of the moon because he likes them, so he asked to be tagged on the story where I uploaded a picture of the moon, but despite that he didn't repost, which I found weird because he has a highlight of the moon and there is a girl whose story he had re-uploaded. This highly disturbed me. He posts other women on his story too. Apart from this, there was this one time his friend has posted him and this girl had written a paragraph for him in the comments, but then after I checked the friend's story he went private immediately. He also likes a lot of posts that are something you would send to someone you love, but he didn't send them to me, and likes this fitness influencer a lot. I am currently working on my body, knowing I am not his type, but the way he is acting has me very insecure. Now I am planning to distance myself to keep my sanity in place because this has driven me insane. Would I be the asshole if I asked him whether he is cheating? If so, how do I ask him? The fact that my younger cousin has a crush on me turns me on. I'm 37 and my cousin is 24. He's had a crush on me since he was really young. He grew up calling me his beautiful cousin. He has other cousins, I'm not his only cousin, and he only does that with me. We really get along, we have always been very friendly to each other. He kinda used to be intimidated by me at first, his own confession. I remember I would want to check you out during family meals, but I was afraid someone would notice. And I didn't know what you would think of me. I eventually got really close to him. I would even ask him play with my hair. Actually, I only asked for that once. After that he started asking, "Can I touch your hair?" And he got comfortable enough around me, he started hugging me, etc. He's a really sweet guy. Confident but really sweet and very humble. In short, I eventually kissed him when he was almost 19 and I jokingly put my hand in his pants. Not in his boxers, just in his pants. After all these years he still remembers that I kissed him and that I put my hand in there. I don't tease every guy who's attracted to me, it's just that this dynamic, the age difference and all these things combined make it kinda kinky and fun. He's always been attracted to me and he will probably always be. I have to say I'm very far from average looking. Ha!
I think my family is an incest cult. I don't know if my family traditions are ethical. My family partakes in inbreeding. The people that we tend to marry can vary from first cousins to siblings. My mom isn't my father's first wife, and she isn't fully related to him, but she is his half-cousin. My father's first wife was his sister. She died due to heart complications, and they shared 2 daughters. A while ago my half-sister, 28, invited me to have drinks with some of her friends. In the country I live in the legal drinking age is 16, and the topic of our appearance came up. We all look very similar to each other. I have lightly researched before I posted this, and it is common for inbred children to be some sort of albino. Facial deformities as well, I'm not sure, and I told them that it was because we are related. Her friend didn't realize what I meant and more than likely took it as what it sounded like. We both share the same father, so of course we look alike. My sister did, though, and we ended up leaving early. On the car ride home she told me that our family matters are meant to stay quiet and away from people who aren't our own. She kept saying that even after we arrived home, and even told my parents about it. My father got very upset after she told him and left the house. My mother simply told me that I wouldn't be able to keep going out with my sister and her friends if I didn't learn how to act properly while other people are in attendance. I spent the entirety of the night looking up why our relation's wrong, and I haven't been able to stop thinking of it since. This happened a fortnight ago and I am still debating whether I should post this or not, but I need counseling and I don't want to ask my parents about it. I just need to make it known to someone as I have no friends, I am homeschooled and only ever leave my house with my sisters, and my full-blooded brothers seem to be aware with how our family dynamics aren't socially acceptable and are okay with it. I don't know what to do. I did not know that homeschooling is illegal in Germany up until 30 minutes ago. My mother has been my tutor since I was a child. I know next to nothing of her own education, but she says it's the same as my own. I also do not know the legality and legitimacy of their marriages now that it has been brought to my attention that it is not legal to marry one sibling in my country. I was not aware. My grandparents' parents were cousins, that is as far back as I know, but it could go further than that. Our family members tend to remarry often, 4 or 5 times, and there are a lot of family members, so I understand as to how it could be confusing. My parents are not physically abusive to us, they do not hit us nor do they restrict anything from us. We each have our own room, and our own beds. My father's first daughters are one of the only few people in our family that have friends outside of our relatives. They are older, therefore they have more freedom to go out and socialize. What things did you do as a kid that you now realize is extremely weird? 1. I used to eat tissues as a kid. My mom found out one day and yelled at me to stop, as any sane parent would do. So I started eating them in secret, sneaking away with a tissue box to another room to eat a tissue or 2, until one day when I was about 5 years old I had to go to the hospital. I had no idea what was going on, all I knew was that I had trouble breathing through my nose. Before my operation I was in the hospital and I overheard one of the nurses say that they just needed to remove the excess tissue in my nose. Naturally I thought that the tissues I had eaten had started getting clogged up in my nose and I never ate a tissue again. I realized at 14 that it was muscle tissue in my nose and not the actual tissues I was eating. 2. When I was around 8 years old I liked the way clean towels tasted. Something I really enjoyed was putting a towel over a straw and drinking Kool-Aid through it. My mother wasn't a fan of having white towels covered with red spots, so she put a stop to it pretty quick. 3. I used to stand in my bedroom window and try to stay as still as possible so the neighbors would think my parents had had a statue made of me. I would stand in different poses too, so they'd think there were multiple statues which my parents would rotate around the house. The way I saw it, only important people had statues built of them. I wanted the neighbors to know they lived near a pretty important guy. 4. Found a cat skull buried in the garden, pulled the teeth out and put them under my pillow for what I thought would be easy money. 5. In grade 1 we would sit in a group on the floor in front of the teacher while she read us stories. I would sit at the back of the group against the wall and pull my pants halfway down my butt. I liked feeling the cool ground wall against my bare butt. 6. I would add several drops of Tabasco to my unsweetened iced tea. I called it Asian tea despite knowing Tabasco and Lipton were in no way Asian. I also didn't like it very much but made myself drink it so that I could understand the Asian community better. Asian friends I have now are still baffled at the connection I tried to make. 7. I used to eat mechanical pencil lead. No idea how I got into that habit but I think I enjoyed the crunchiness of it. Did it for a little while but showed it to a classmate and she immediately went to the teacher who then called my mom who scolded me and told me to stop. Goodbye. 0.7 PTSD on the job? My best friend's dad was a tower crane operator. After 30 years on the job with a perfect safety record he ended up having an accident. To this day talking about it brings him to tears. He retired because of it. Spent a week in the mental ward because of it. He was moving a large pace of machinery up from street level to above the floor being worked on, a job he's done 100,000 times before. Hoisting is a team operation with people all over the site working together. The machinery is several stories up when something lets loose and it swings and drops right into a crowded area street level. The emergency calls from injured and dying workers go out on the radio. He's 20 stories up and can only watch the response. He turns off the radios and sinks inside himself. After an hour or so out of contact with the ground, a rescue team climbs up and he's coaxed down. 2 dead, 3 injured in the failure. Questions/investigations raised if he had made an error in lifting causing the collapse. The grief wrecked him fast and after a couple days off on suspension he is blackout drunk with a gun in his hand. His son finds him like this passed out with a sewer slide all note already written. He's admitted to a mental health service, eventually cleared of any wrongdoing by the inquiry. After several months he cleared to return to work, but he can't. He's lost the nerves needed and takes an early retirement package. There is a happy ending. After about a year golfing he got restless and took studies up in safety-related topics. After a few years he moved into an advisory safety management for tower crane and hoisting operators where he educates the next generation. My parents will divorce if I don't break up with my 21 meters girlfriend, 19F. I have a girlfriend at college, and my parents don't approve of our relationship at all. Last few weeks they've been furious about it, and threatening to divorce. They told me not to date until I get my bachelor's, which is at least 1 semester from now, and to date only Asian, preferably Chinese American, girls. I'm Asian, and she's white. We didn't even do anything inappropriate, we're just close friends, often hang out together on campus, and we're in a swing dance club. I didn't even tell my parents about my relationship. How did they find out? My sister, 18F, also goes to same college as me, and she always saw me walking around holding hands and eating in the cafeteria with the same girl. Instead of asking me about it, she told my parents. She took pictures of us from afar, and used it as evidence against me. When I told my parents that both my girlfriend and I are legal adults, and that her parents approve of the relationship, they said, "You'll always be a child in our eyes, and her parents don't influence us." They're primarily mad because I kept my relationship a secret for so long, and secondary reason is that I'm breaking their expectations about dating. My grades are fine. I have a 3.83 GPA and got a summer internship, and I've never gotten in trouble at school. What's worse is that my sister was allowed to date as early as her freshman year in high school. She's even invited her boyfriends home and slept in the same bed as them, and went on vacations with their families. She said like 3 boyfriends already, as she gets into dating drama frequently. When I, 3 years older than her, asked my parents if I could date, they said no, because they don't want me getting in trouble. She did mediocre in high school and barely squeaked out a 3.0 her first semester in college. When I told my parents that I love my girlfriend and I'm not breaking up with her, they said that they will divorce each other if I don't break up with her ASAP. They were forcing me to pull out my phone and text her, saying that I want to break up. I refused, arguing that they let my irresponsible, academically struggling younger sister date, but not me. My parents said that I value white trash over family, and that they spent 21 years raising a failure. I'm not a failure. My sister is my dad hit me several times, giving me a black eye, while my mom lied on the floor crying, saying that she wishes she aborted me. Then he argued with my mom and screamed at each other. Meanwhile, I grabbed my backpack with my stuff in it and drove off to my girlfriend's house about 90 minutes away. My parents fortunately don't know where she lives. When he noticed my car was missing, he called me but I didn't pick up. Then he texted me asking where I am, and said that he would come get me. I told my girlfriend's family what happened, and they offered to let me stay with them until we go back to campus. My mom later texted me to inform me that my parents have filed a missing person report against me. I texted back, saying that I'm at my girlfriend's place, and that they can't stop me. I got my girlfriend's dad to call my parents, and he told them to F off, and that if they keep treating me like this they will take legal action themselves. I know it's only because she and I are very committed in our relationship, and her parents are supportive of it. My beloved cat is dying. How do I deal with picturing a future without her? Olive, my beloved 15-year-old cat, is my best friend. We have an incredible bond and communicate with each other effortlessly. She brings so much joy to my life, and I can see that she's happy to be with me as well. Unfortunately, Olive is currently unwell and confined to a small area to prevent her from roaming around the house or going outside, where she may become too weak to return. Our house is large, so it's important to keep her in a secure space. We had big plans to live on a farm together where Olive could freely explore and enjoy a healthy and happy life in the countryside. I always imagined that she would be my constant companion, providing comfort whenever I felt lonely. However, her illness has put those dreams on hold. Olive is usually an I don't care kind of cat and quite hyper, but when I'm upset, she seems to sense it and comes to comfort me. It's in those moments that I realize she's more than just a pet. She's my rock and the one I can truly rely on. Even though she's technically an adult now, I still see her as my baby, and my love for her knows no bounds. The feeling is mutual, as I believe she loves me just as much. This makes it even more devastating to witness her suffering. I'm finding it incredibly difficult to sleep and eat. Nights are filled with stress and the constant worry that I'm not doing enough for Olive, even though I know deep down that I'm doing everything I can. I desperately want to get a job to afford x-rays for her, but it will take time, and time is not something we have in abundance. The thought of her passing quickly and without pain brings a strange sense of relief, as I hate to imagine her enduring prolonged suffering. It breaks my heart to see her like this. It's challenging to find someone who understands what I'm going through because, to them, Olive is just a cat. But to me, she is so much more. She's been there for me in times when no one else has, and now all I want is to make her better. Vets have never been particularly helpful in the past, which adds to my frustration and fear. I wonder if this situation will be any different. Olive was perfectly fine just a few days ago, and her sudden decline is both shocking and devastating. Her once healthy appetite has disappeared, as eating now triggers fits of coughing. The love I have for Olive is so overwhelming that it's becoming unbearable to witness her suffering. If she were to pass away, I would feel utterly lost and devastated. As a college professor, what's something you've had to tell a student that you thought was common knowledge? This happened years ago and it changed the way I looked at a lot of things. I was invited to teach a seminar at the local employment center. They wanted me to help students use Microsoft Word to make attractive, well-written resumes and cover letters. Not a problem. I've always loved helping people with that kind of thing. I entered the room and found about 8 or 10 people sitting at computers, ready to get started. They ranged in age from about 25 to about 65 and they were all eager to get a job. Most of them had been out of work for months. I introduced myself and gave a quick rundown of our agenda for the next 2 hours. I asked them to turn on their computers and we could begin. They all sat there, looking uncomfortable. Finally, one of them spoke up, "How do I turn it on?" I realized that many of them hadn't worked on a desktop PC like the ones in this office. Again, not a problem. I told them the power button was on the computer tower, below the monitor. What's a computer tower? Oops, I had used a term that not everyone knows. No biggie. I went around the room and pointed out the button. Once everyone had their computers on, I told them to open Microsoft Word. Again, they all stared at me, looking uncomfortable. Once again, the bravest one asked, "How do we do that?" I started getting suspicious and I put aside my lesson plan for a minute to ask the students about their previous experience with computers. None of them had ever used one before. They didn't know what a mouse was. They didn't know what the desktop was. They didn't know about icons, cursors, files, browsers, Windows, any of it. At that point, I literally threw my lesson plan in the trash. Instead, I taught them about the parts of a computer, how to use a mouse, how to open programs, and how to access the internet. It was a very productive and eye-opening 2 hours. I had just assumed that everyone knew these basic computer terms. I learned most of them as a child in the 80s, and most of my college students had smartphones and laptops. I took it for granted that a bunch of adults in the 21st century would have at least some experience with a computer of some kind. It was a sad lesson that there were still a lot of places where computers just weren't accessible. These people had never had jobs, schools, or libraries that could give them access to computers, smartphones, or the internet. You'd think that things would have improved a lot in the years since, but at the start of the COVID lockdowns, I found myself fighting with administration about issues of access. They assured me that students would be quick to get on board with online courses and that it would be the teachers who struggled, because we weren't digital natives like our students. I tried to explain to them that, yes, many of our students were born into homes with computers and tablets and smartphones, but many of them were not, and even those who had devices didn't necessarily have the bandwidth, the connection, or the webcam/mic necessary to keep up. We ended up having to start a laptop loaner program and putting free Wi-Fi in our parking lot so that students could access the internet from the safety of their cars. It wasn't ideal, but it finally helped our leadership see what they had been missing about our students. You might think that I live in some poor, middle-of-nowhere town, but the fact is that I live in one of the richest cities in America. Many of our residents just can't afford decent technology or internet access. When I was 21, I matched with a girl on Tinder and took her to a Motel 6 just to play PS4. This is so embarrassing, but I just have to get this off my chest and tell somebody because I just thought of this and was cringing so hard at myself. Basically, I just broken up with my longtime girlfriend of 7 years and was trying to make friends. I used Tinder as one of the ways to do that. It was in my bio and everything that I was just looking for friends. Anyways, this girl matches with me and is being super flirty, asking to meet up and hang out, and it all just goes so over my head. I legit wasn't thinking about making love at all. It's so surreal looking back just how bad this girl tried to sleep with me, and I just kept so innocently and accidentally blowing her off. She must have been so frustrated. So she asks to hang out one day and gives me her address. I drive to her place expecting to hang out, and she says we can't stay at her place because her family is weird. So she suggests we go to mine. I live with roommates at the time and didn't want to bring someone I just met to their space since they just had a kid. We talked about that and agreed no strangers during this time. It was just post-COVID. So we thought about where we could go and she suggested a hotel. I thought about it and was like, yeah, it's basically like renting a room for a day and we can grab my PS4 from my house real quick and game on their TV. I'll even get some snacks. So we drove to my house. I ran in and grabbed my PS4. And then we drove to the motel. The lady working behind the desk sees us, 19 female and 21 male, walk in and ask for a room and just gives us a sly smile while handing us the key, and the girl got all red and I literally didn't know why but didn't think anything of it. We get to the room. I start hooking up the PS4 while she just sits there on the bed, taking her shoes off and jacket off, and then I turn on the TV and sit next to her handing her a controller. She starts scooting closer to me and I'm like, okay, so we can either play a co-op RPG game if you want a story, or we can go old school shooter if you're looking to complete, or we could team up against online peeps in WWE. And the entire time my mind is just focused on having a good time and hanging out with my new friend. We get through a couple hours of playing different games and eventually order a pizza and decide to watch a movie. So now we're sitting on the bed a whole cushion apart watching a movie while eating pizza. After it got dark and the movie ended, I was like, okay, I guess I should get you home now. And she was super silent the whole ride back. I couldn't figure out if I'd done something wrong. After I drop her off and tell her I had fun, she literally slams my door closed and walks inside. I was taken aback and spent the whole drive back to my place trying to figure out if I'd said something or was rude in any way. I texted her a couple days later, and she had blocked me. So that's the story of how my completely oblivious self blue-balled some Tinder chick who wanted to make love, but instead got 6 hours of Borderlands and a 2-hour in-depth rundown of the Elder Scrolls lore and why the Khajiit have 7 different races based on their births and relationship to the moon cycles. What are some things that are normal to women but mind-blowing to men? 1. Walking around acting normal while you're bleeding, fatigued, cramping, and more. If someone was experiencing those symptoms as a result of anything else, they'd be on sick leave, or at least communicating to people how they're unwell. But nope, suck it up and go about your day like your uterus isn't trying to murder you. 2. A friend of mine called me because she was stranded in a dodgy part of town and needed to just have someone on the phone with her for comfort while she waited for her friend. Men kept talking to her and she kept telling me how uncomfortable she is. Some dudes just constantly blowing kisses and coming to talk to her. One dude even tried to take her phone from her to talk to me. I've been in that part of town, but I'm 6 feet 3 inches and reasonably athletic. My experience of it was completely different. It was crazy. I could feel through the phone how vulnerable she felt, which I always knew was how it felt, but I had never actually felt it before. Hearing her fend off aggressive men was so nerve-wracking. 3. Feeling a fart roll up your vulva in the front. 4. The amount of toilet paper used. 5. How they can take their bra off from under their shirt. I don't know why we find it so impressive, but it is. 6. Locking your car immediately when you get in it before seatbelt or putting the key in. 7. Maybe a little more wholesome, but as a girl people just put babies in my lap. Like I was at a party, commented about how cute the baby was. Some lady I didn't know. And I got to hold the baby for a while. I was literally asked if I wanted to feed her or change her. Complete stranger. 8. That girl start getting verbally sexualized by a certain kind of grown man, commonly around 11 years old. 9. I was followed by 2 adult men in the neighborhood I was living at the time for 3 days/nights when I was barely 13 years old. I was with my mother during most of this. She hadn't noticed, but I had, because she taught me to be hyper aware of my surroundings. I told her and she began to notice seeing them everywhere we went. It culminated in us being followed from the nearby convenience store home, and having to switch our route home. Once home we told other family members they already knew, but we told them they tried to follow us home. We had a front porch and I was sitting there. Turns out one of the men was hiding in the bushes in front of our place. My uncle and mom chased him off. My uncle would have killed him if he had gotten to him. He always carried a knife for protection. Neighbors came out with bats and other things because of the yelling. I grew up in bad neighborhoods in a major city. The neighbors stuck around and offered to keep an eye out in case those men ever came around again. My mom always taught me to be hyper vigilant about my surroundings and safety from an early age, and to try to travel even to the store with someone. As a woman, it didn't matter if I was a child or an adult. I was viewed with a school gaze and as prey. I had and have to be on guard because of it. It's unfortunate that women in general have to live this way. What's the most extreme thing you've done for revenge, and did it backfire? I was so effing pissed off at the popular kid who had been bullying me all through high school. He was an arrogant star athlete and he loved to kick and throw my stuff around during lunchtime just to get a rise out of me. I'd had enough, so I decided to teach him a lesson before we graduated. I knew there was no guarantee that we'd ever cross paths again after high school, since I was planning on going away for college, so I spent 2 weeks coming up with an elaborate revenge plot. Here's what went down. 1. Got his home phone number from the directory since it was pre-internet era. 2. Used some of my football earnings to hire someone to call his house pretending to be from the local electric company, saying there were billing issues that needed verification. 3. Made sure all the info matched his personal details. 4. Called back myself and pretended to be from the electric company, mentioning issues with his bill and asking about any appliances connected to surge protectors or power strips. 5A. Told him our records indicated several appliances were plugged into these power strips, posing a fire hazard due to overload. 5B. Specified a variety of appliances like VCRs, DVD players, stereo systems, basically everything he owned. 6. Recorded the whole conversation for evidence in case things got real bad later on. 7. Later that night when everyone was asleep called back. 8. Connected each listed appliance up with its own power strip. 9. Switched them all on. 10. Cut all their cords. 11. Securely taped them shut. 12. Left everything as it is. 13. Waited eagerly for chaos. 14. Watched as my plan unfolded. 15. Got arrested. 16. Confessed. 17. Tried navigating life with satisfaction afterwards. We never crossed paths again after graduation, but years later one of my friends told me what happened next. When he woke up in morning, half his stuff wasn't working, including lights and plugs. He called electric company assuming something had gone wrong, but they said there weren't any problems, then asked if anything unusual had happened recently. He mentioned prank calls related electricity usage, which led police getting involved, and using recorded conversation identified prank caller, me, arrested and faced multiple felony charges, but parents hired lawyers, negotiated reduction in charges, and ultimately convicted. Felony count directly related threatening people's lives, got sentenced 7 years prison. Think since this happened shortly before 9/11, exaggerated response and limited understanding. Cybercrime, especially rural America, not as bad initially intended, still carried sense satisfaction. Am I the a-hole for being better than my friend at everything? There was this guy, Bob. A lot of my friends were friends with him, but me and Bob, we didn't like each other, because Bob hated me. He didn't hate me at first, it was just a series of unfortunate events. It started in junior high. We both went out for the cross-country team. He was good, but I was better. I mean, I didn't notice the guy, it wasn't like I was out to get him, but I was always just that much faster than him. Back then, it was the top 7 racers from each school that got to compete in the big multi-school races. I was number 7. Bob was number 8. Bob and I were about the same size. This is important because we both also went out for the wrestling team. In each weight class only 2 people got to compete at the meets. There was another guy who was a good, experienced wrestler. Neither of us had a chance against him. That left me and Bob fighting for that second slot. And I was a better wrestler than Bob. It wasn't that I was great or anything. I did okay, won a few more than I lost, but I was just enough better that poor Bob never beat me. It wasn't just sports though, and really, I wasn't very good at sports. I was a big nerd though. And while most people don't want to be nerds, nerds don't mind being big nerds. In my school, I was known as the computer guy. Bob also loved computers. There was a computer club and we'd try to write crappy little programs in whatever the basic language was that ran on the Apple computers we had in the labs. None of us really knew anything, but I was always 2 steps ahead of Bob. The thing was, Bob and I were very much alike. That's why I liked him. We had very similar interests, and while I'm not great at anything, I was just always slightly better at him at literally everything we ever objectively competed in. By 8th grade, he'd given me the cold shoulder. He was never mean to me, but he was always distant and just generally seemed like he didn't like me. I might not ever had put it all together though. I never thought about him and me competing with each other, until the 8th grade winter dance. I had a crush on a girl. I was socially awkward, and I awkwardly asked her to the dance. I actually asked her if anyone had asked her yet, and she said, one guy, but she didn't think she wanted to say yes to him. I asked her, and she said yes. Junior high romance, I didn't think much of it. We went to the dance, had a good time, and then dated for like 3 weeks. As it turns out, Bob was her good friend and Bob had a crush on her. Bob was the one who asked her to the dance, but she saw him as a friend. She told me that Bob basically hated me and complained about me all the time. She didn't really know who I was, until Bob started telling her how awful I was. Poor Bob. Once she said it to me, it all made sense. I'd hate being one-upped constantly by some guy who was just like me, only slightly better at stuff. Nobody would like that, and then I swoop in, steal his date. If I wouldn't have asked her, she would have gone with him, and then I end up dating his crush. I felt bad, but I also didn't know how to tell him I was sorry. Also, I wasn't really sorry for my actions, I didn't do anything wrong. Just sorry that my existing seemed to make his life worse. I tried my best to give him space after that, but obviously, easier said than done. Our final interaction came after 8th grade, it was the summer before high school, my older sister was running in some 10K race and my mom wakes me up at 5:30 a.m. and tells me I should go. I didn't train, I wasn't ready, I didn't even know it was a 10K, our CC races in junior high were only 1.5 miles, not 6.2, still, whatever, I agree. I go to the race and I do pretty darn well. It was the furthest I'd ever run, and my pace really dropped towards the end, but I did it. I finished. I averaged 7:01 per mile and was really proud. At the end, they had a little award ceremony thing and I was shocked to hear my name called. The race had different age groups and I'd taken first place. In fact, there were only 2 people in the under 14 group, me and Bob. I had no idea, but here I was, taking the first place medal from poor Bob. He finished 15 seconds after me. I swear, when he looked at me on that stage, I saw absolute hate in his eyes. Bob and I went to different high schools and thankfully, I haven't run into him since. I stopped running, but I wrestled in high school and I always hoped that him and I would face off again and he'd beat me, and that would be his happy ending, only it never happened. What's the best way to deal with family members who refuse to help care for their old parents? I'm not necessarily proud of this, but I finally had a pretty nasty breakdown and verbally tore my brother a new one after I just couldn't take care of our mother anymore. She refused to help herself, refused to respect even basic rules, but enabled her friends to take thousands of dollars worth of our stuff while we were trying to get moved out of the house we'd been renting. Her health was deteriorating, only partially her fault, and I was working 100-hour weeks trying to keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies. My husband was half dead from his own medical issues, and my wife was nearly there with him. I was choking on my own lungs from untreated pneumonia that I couldn't even begin to recover from because I was working so hard taking care of her and them, and that was with hubby and wifey killing themselves trying to take care of what I couldn't. The final straw was her letting her friend take everything not nailed down from the old house and absolutely unable/refusing to understand the problem. When said friend was about to toss her on the street for no reason other than mom stopped letting her take all her SS payments, I finally just snapped. Our sister is completely useless, she can't even take care of herself, and was homeless herself at the time. I called my brother and explained the situation and he just did not get it. He understood what I said, but he didn't comprehend the severity of the situation. He was trying so hard to understand why I couldn't take her back in and why I refused to help anymore. So I just snapped. It was not pretty. I was a gibbering, snot-covered mess by the end of it, but he was down 3 days later packing a car full of whatever of her stuff I wasn't willing to hold on to, mostly photo albums and trinkets I wanted anyway, and she ended up staying with him for nearly 6 months until a slot opened up for her at the local income-restricted senior living facility. She's been living there for just over a year now and thriving, thankfully. I haven't gotten flack from him over her since. Now that I'm nearly 2,000 miles away I can't do much to take care of her, but I stay as on top of things as I can, since my sister is currently trying to weasel her way into leeching off mom again and we're not playing that game. My wife demanded a hall pass after beating cancer, so I sent her to the streets after she was unfaithful in the sheets. My wife and I have been married since 2001 and together since 1999. She is the most intelligent, thoughtful, caring, loyal person I know and I have always considered myself fortunate to have met and married her. Even today, she remains aesthetically beautiful and men have consistently complimented her throughout our marriage. Despite their advances, she has always rebuffed them. Earlier this year, she was diagnosed with uterine cancer stage 1 and underwent a full hysterectomy. I was never concerned about cancer. It was diagnosed early, addressed swiftly, and she made a full recovery. I took time off work to care for her after the surgery and all seemed well. There were some expected emotional instances on her part and though I am not particularly emotional, we confronted them together. After her recovery, she insisted that we start living life to the fullest and embarked on a 10-day trip to Europe, followed by a journey to Belize. We also have a trip planned to the UK and Spain later this year. I am fine with these endeavors as they contribute to building memories and checking off bucket list adventures for her and us. I understand that these actions stem from her feeling fragile. She also embraced activities like yoga, swimming, and healthy cooking classes. I was fully on board until last week. Last week she came home from work and expressed a desire for a hall pass, a one-time opportunity for her to have intimacy with someone else besides me. She explained that since her cancer diagnosis, her outlook on life has changed and she doesn't want to be restricted from doing things she desires. She mentioned a guy at her work whom she's always been attracted to and as he's leaving the company, she sees it as the perfect opportunity to engage with someone else. She She asserted that I could say no, but doing so would result in her being mad and disappointed at me for an indeterminate amount of time and would confirm my male toxicity and insecurity. I don't consider myself toxic, and if not wanting my wife of 20 plus years to have intimacy with someone else is considered insecure, then I guess I'm insecure. I expressed appreciation for her openness, but clarified that approval via coercion is not true approval. I also conveyed my disapproval of her language in describing my yet unknown reaction to the significant issue that could impact the rest of our marriage and life. The next morning, she apologized for putting such a weighted decision solely on my shoulders. To help, she decided to take the decision away from me. She booked a hotel near where her coworkers are having a farewell party for this guy and planned to spend the night there with him, hoping I would still be here when she returned. She assured me that she would answer any questions I have about the night afterward, but not before. She refused to disclose any details about him, stating that she knows me too well and revealing such information would lead me to dwell and obsess over him, making it too real for me. Her perspective is that the less I know, the better, which contradicts her offer to tell me anything I want to know after it happens. I think she assumes I don't want to know anything or she simply will not tell me. Part of me thinks that at least she has been honest with me, and she has been through a lot since finding out she had cancer, so maybe I should just let it happen. I certainly have no concept of what she went through, so I cannot dismiss how this affected her mental state and outlook on life. Another part of me wants to put my foot down and say this is not going to happen and deal with the consequences when they happen. Her best friend called me callous for even suggesting that I wouldn't let it happen because I have no idea what she went through. I find it hard to believe that she is okay with the possibility of throwing away 20 plus years of marriage over some guy with whom she has had no relationship outside of work. Part of me wants to know who this guy is. What does he look like? What he has that is so enthralling for her. Is he just a safe option? Is he married? Does his wife know? Update 1. I was hoping that my opposition to her plans would give her pause, but unfortunately, that did not happen. I said I was a hard no, and I wasn't sure how I would feel about you if you went ahead with it. I was met once again with this is for me. It will be one time. What can I say to help you deal with it? You'll get over it. We were meant to be, regardless of the situation. After that, she left on Saturday, ostensibly to meet her coworkers, but in reality to be with a guy. I asked her to text me when she was leaving for the bar, and when she did, I asked her if she was really going to go through with this. After her response, I am not answering any more questions tonight. I will see you tomorrow. I blocked her. Then I did something either stupid or brilliant. I went to the bar where the get-together was happening. Well, not the bar, but a transit bench across the street. I waited for a long time. It was running through my mind, leading up to this event, that I needed to know who this guy was. Maybe to compare myself against him, to see what he had that I didn't. It was driving me crazy, not knowing who he was and what was so special about him that she would ruin a marriage. For after what seemed like an eternity, a woman that I recognized from my wife's office left the bar and got in a cab. Soon other people started filing out, and the entire group came out. People were hugging a man and shaking his hand. I assumed that I had my guy. I didn't see my wife and had a brief thought that maybe she called it all off. I unblocked her, and there were no messages. Everyone said their goodbyes and left. The guy was just standing outside for a couple minutes, and then my wife came out. She looked around, took his hand, and started walking away together. Of all the emotions I went through, trepidation, sadness, anger, it was disgust. That really encapsulated the event for me. This guy was short, fat, and bald. All the things I cannot compete with. Ultimately, I felt like a pervert for watching from a distance. I followed until they got to the hotel and then turned around and went home. I woke up on Sunday morning and put a lock on the master bedroom door. I moved her things to the spare room and left a note asking her to find other accommodations as quickly as possible. I visited another friend who is a lawyer, and he gave me some great advice and a couple of recommendations for divorce attorneys when I got home. And as for my friend's advice, I recorded the interaction. I was halfway up the stairs when she came up from the family room asking what was going on. Could we talk? I thought we talked about this. I just answered with, I am not interested in discussing this tonight, and went to bed. After not getting a response from me through the door, she left me alone. I feel kind of like a child for not talking with her and shutting the door on her, but I just couldn't look at her. On Monday, I got up and got ready for work. She was waiting for me and asked if we could discuss getting back to normal. I said, you have been doing all the talking for the both of us for the last week. Why don't you continue? And left for work. Update 2. My lawyer wasn't available for a few days, so I was faced with the reality of having to live with my wife in the interim. I really didn't want to go home and have any discussion, let alone a discussion about our relationship. When I did get home, I was basically ambushed by her friends and my mother-in-law. Instead of taking the remorseful approach, they decided that a full court press was what the situation wanted, and I was basically berated by them. Her best friend was definitely the ringleader, but all of them decided to say such things as, she's been through a lot, you don't know what she's been through, you have no idea what it is like to face something like this. This was a one-time thing. At least she told you. She could have hidden it from you. She will never see the guy again. And my favorite, you are a monster for what you have been putting her through these last couple of days. I listened with a cold look on my face, and when there was a pause in their fury, I asked if they were all done now. Then I asked my wife if there was anyone in her circle of friends or anyone else that she forgot to tell about this. I quietly informed all of them that I was going to sit down with their husbands and tell them about how they were verbally abusing me, shaming me, and trying to coerce me into staying with a cheater. After I told them to leave, I said that I had no say in the entire event, and so they have no say in whether I stay or not. My soon-to-be ex-wife sort of apologized. She said that she regretted the entire thing. I said, there is a difference between regret and remorse. You regret what happened because of the cause and effect. You have regret because your life will never be the same. Our relationship will never be the same because you were wholly and willfully unconcerned about me and what I wanted. She asked if I had any questions and she would answer them now, no matter how disturbing. I said that the one question I do have is why? Not necessarily why this guy, why this low-end, unattractive, unfit guy, but why someone else in the first place. She said that the cancer scared her to her core. She felt like she was rushing toward mortality, and stepping out of that tunnel was appealing. She said that after all this time of being a wife and mother and worrying about family, this was something just for her, an escape. The guy was just someone who was interested in her for a long time. She knew he wouldn't say no, and he was the complete opposite of me. I said if I was going to risk my marriage, the woman would have to be a serious upgrade from you. I told her that I saw you and him coming out of the bar that night. I watched you walk away from the bar, hand in hand, towards the hotel. I said that you looked too familiar with each other and asked if there was something going on before all this. She said no, but who knows if that is the truth or not. I said that after all our years together, your lack of respect for me was astonishing. I finished by saying that I would never be able to look at myself in the mirror again if I condone that level of disrespect, and stay with you. I said I hope we can go our separate ways amicably and that I have an appointment with a lawyer later in the week. I again asked her to find some other accommodations, and she simply said, I am not going anywhere. We are not getting a divorce. I will give you all the time you need and do whatever you can to recover from this. We will get past this. She has asked me to go to marriage counseling, which I refused. Why would I go to counseling? I did nothing to warrant needing a therapist's advice. I had her served and gave her a notice to vacate because the house is my premarital asset. She has moved in with her mom, but I find her constantly coming by to see if I need anything or making suggestions like what if we had an open relationship, only on your side? Which seems kind of desperate and pathetic. She has said that she will drag the divorce out for as long as possible, but so far has been compliant. The worst part of all this is telling my daughter that we are getting a divorce and why, followed closely by her begging me to give her mom another chance. I am not sure I would be afforded the same consideration if I was the one who was cheating. Update 3: There is not much to report. We are in the process of getting a divorce. However, where we live, we must be legally separated for 1 year. My wife has said that she will give me whatever I want in the divorce if I agree to attend marriage counseling, but I'm not interested. There was a bit of back and forth while we worked out what separation looks like in everyday life from this point forward. As a result, we have only just agreed to the confines of the legal separation. So as we move towards defining the divorce language, maybe my stance may change. I received a lot of messages about her friend group and my daughter, so I will clear up any misconceptions now. My daughter isn't taking her mother's side. She has always been a mama's girl, but she is very unhappy with her mom right now. Her initial reaction was just shock and held out hope that we would work through any issues and stay together. Now she accepts that is not going to happen. She has been limiting her interactions with her, but at the end of the day, she is still her mom. The friend group husbands were upset at the level of complicity of their wives in aiding and abetting the cheating and made them cut off my wife, but that seems to have been forgotten at this point. The best friend was the ringleader and seems to have taken perverse pleasure in actively creating scenarios where they would be in contact, at the very least, encouraging to the point of causing her husband to question her motives. It turns out she didn't like me at all, and this was her way of sticking it to me. I guess she wins. I have decided not to date anyone for a while. I will not be getting married ever again. So that's all. I doubt I will post again unless she wins the lottery and I find it in my heart to forgive her. My boyfriend started to act toxically masculine after watching too many alpha podcasts. So I gave him an ultimatum. My boyfriend and I have been living with my boyfriend for less than a year, and things have been rocky to say the least. During the first week, I told him that we need to evenly split things like washing the dishes and cleaning the bathroom. But he didn't pay attention to me. If I didn't wash the dirty dishes, then they would just sit there for days. If I didn't do the laundry, then he would just keep wearing dirty clothes over and over again. I tried telling him multiple times that this wasn't the correct way to live, and that he needed to take some responsibility. But every single time his response would be, a man shouldn't have to do all these things. The thing is, I was really busy because I was balancing a job alongside my master's degree, and literally had no time to argue. It was much faster for me to just do the chores rather than ask my boyfriend to step up. I was just happy that he was paying the rent on time. But a few days ago, things changed. My master's degree was finally complete and so I was free to focus on my job and household. So I decided to have a proper talk with my boyfriend, because I didn't want to live life on the edge anymore. I told him that I needed to start taking on the duties of the house. My new job after graduation meant that I would make more than him, so we needed to switch the roles. I thought that he would agree with me, but my words angered him so much that he punched our glass table and shattered it. He completely blew up on me, calling me a woke lunatic and that I was undermining his authority by asking him to do chores. I chuckled at that and asked him, what authority? He became red in the face and said, let me show you how alpha I really am. Then he began pushing me towards the bedroom and tried to take off my clothes. I don't know what gave him the idea that I consented to this, and told him to cut it out. But he didn't stop, and kept saying that I'm going to service him and he's going to punish me. I called him delusional and that he had been watching too much adult films. I pushed him off me, which was surprisingly easy, and rushed to the door. I had my keys with me so I just left in my car and went to my friend's house so I could cool down. My boyfriend had literally just tried to force himself on me, and I was sure that I didn't want to stay with him after that. But I also didn't just want to break up peacefully after what he did. His complete disregard of my opinion gave me an idea. You see, around the time we had started dating, he was struggling to pay his college tuition and had asked me to help him. I agreed and paid his tuition for that semester. Well, those records had listed me as a sponsor on my boyfriend's application. So I immediately called the college harassment department and explained the situation. I told them that I wanted my money back as reimbursement for being assaulted, even though I didn't need the money at all. But that showed them that I was serious and could potentially file a report against my boyfriend. If that happened, the college's reputation would take a massive hit. While they didn't give me back my money, they did expel my boyfriend on the spot and banned him from reapplying in the future. He only had a semester left before he was graduated, so this shocked him to the core. Of course, the college didn't tell him that I was the one who reported him, so he had no idea and was crying on the phone with me. It turns out, the situation had escalated to the point where his workplace was notified, and he was also being fired as a result. I'm just going to stay with my friend for now, and my boyfriend will have to evict because he will run out of money for rent. So, just because he wanted to show off how alpha he is now going to end up homeless and without a college degree. My girlfriend asked to open the relationship and I just pointed her to the door. Was it too much? I strongly believe that in a monogamous relationship, when someone asks to open it, well, is it because that person saw something else out there and is ready to try it instead of working in the relationship? Basically is blind-sighting his slasher partner. So I have been with Fran almost 2 as a couple. I thought that things were moving smoothly and was about to ask her to move in at the beginning of April, but lately she was acting rather distant, so I decided to wait a little and watch. I was cheated in the past, so I'm a little cautious with some signs. Out of nowhere, this last Friday, she asked me to open the relationship. She gave me all her big speech, and when she ended her presentation, I asked her if she had someone in mind, because it's not like we decided today and basically going out with other people tomorrow. Basically, I trick her into telling me what I already knew, and yes, she has someone in mind, which means to me that either she already did it or she has it all set up. So I got up, walk around the apartment while she was trying to sell that this could be good for both us and our relationship. By the time she finished talking, I handed her one of my sport bags with all her stuff in it and told her to leave the spare key over the table on her way out. That we are done and she knows why. Then I went to the couch and turned on the TV, just trying to look indifferent and save face. She was speechless for a while, about to cry, but before she couldn't say something, I told her that I didn't want to talk about anything and she should leave. As soon as she left, I felt like crap. So unworthy. Cried a little, and as of right now, I'm still mourning. My phone has gone almost nuclear with all the calls and texts I received from friends of both sides about my extreme reaction over her simple request. Don't know what she told them. So now I'm sitting wondering if I really went overboard and at the same time fighting the urge to run back to her. Because deep inside, even knowing my feelings for her are still there, the trust is gone and I'm not gonna spend all my time watching her movements is not healthy. Maybe in time. Really don't know. Before anyone pointed out, yes, I know. My reaction is a pure reflection of me, not what she did or was about to do or could do. So did I go overboard? I hate my mom. I'm 17 and don't assume this is me going through a phase of being a rebellious leech. I didn't have parental figures in my life. My mom left my dad when I was super young and so I didn't have a chance to meet him until 5th grade summer. My mom almost never showed up for anything in my life, and she has always prioritized her boyfriends over her kids. Actually, when I was super young I had to start therapy because I was having a suicidal episode. On the first day of my session with my therapist, my mom and the people were talking about general information about me and my mental health. And she spent a whole hour talking about herself and her struggles when her 12-year-old daughter literally just tried to kill herself, and I'm not the only depressed daughter on my mom's side. My other sister was cutting her wrists a couple years ago and had to go to the hospital for it. In summary, my sister's childhood was acid, but I have to give my mom credit for trying. She did work full-time trying to support 3 kids and a leeching grandpa. She also did make an effort to let us know that we were loved, because the truth is, that my mom isn't perfect. She's another human who has struggled her whole life for similar reasons to me. She couldn't get a better job because she was a high school dropout. Even though I know how hard her life was, it still won't fix the trauma she's caused me. For so long I couldn't have a meaningful conversation with her because she would always change the topic. The only reason I'm alive today is because I made a really good friend, Kay, and because my mom finally started letting me visit my dad over the summer. My friend taught me a lot about how to treat people, and my father taught me what it was like to be in a loving environment. I live with my dad now and I honestly owe my life to him, but I just can't forgive my mom. I have tried so hard the past few years but I can't. I can't forgive her no matter how much she apologizes. For 17 years she kept me away from my father and his side of the family. I would have been so much better off with them. I wouldn't have developed an anxiety disorder or depression. I could have enjoyed being a kid inside of having to act all grown up to not make anyone worry about me. You know, my grandma said that the one time I visited my dad as a little girl, I would always wait for my dad to come home and eat before I ate. Why? Because some nights I went to bed starving and I didn't want my dad to suffer like that. I hate my mom so much but I can sympathize. She's my anti-hero.
As a teenager, what was the worst thing your parents ever walked in on you doing? When I was but a nipper, 14-15, I had the really great idea of making some sweet booze in my bedroom. To the shops I went and returned with glucose powder and bread yeast, which I mixed in a 500 milliliters plastic bottle with a sports cap, with the top popped open so the carbon dioxide could get out. I shoved some cotton wool under the sports cap, for hygiene. Or something. My classy brew was assembled, I stashed it away at the back of the filing cabinet and left it for a week. A week turned out to be the perfect amount of time for everything to go horribly wrong. The yeast took to the glucose with gusto and formed a thick layer filling the top of the bottle, with the consistency, texture and color of rather chunky puke. I didn't really understand I'd done, I just knew it was unholy and that I had to get rid of it. But first I wanted a sniff, maybe a little poke at this plug of chunky puke facsimile filling the top half of the bottle. I eased the top off. Now, it turns out that my fastidious attention to hygiene had left the bottle somewhat airtight, as my bottle of what was essentially prison wine had been brewing. The carbon dioxide had been building up and building up and building up. I'm sure you know where this is going. The cap exploded off, the bottle vomited up its yeasty cargo with a muted bang, spilling the material all over the ceiling and walls and releasing the most horrific smell. I watched helpless as the fountainhead gushed forth and by mine own hand coated every single one of my possessions in a thick layer of barf that was not barf, but something worse. I stood, my maw agape, caught entirely in that rapturous moment where one knows that one has completely and utterly effed up, watching. As powerless to stop the F up as to stop the slow winding down of time. I managed to hide it for about 3 hours while I furiously scurried back and forth between the bathroom and my bedroom with toilet roll and soap, trying to unmake my folly. There were a few close shaves, a few conversations with my parents with my head peeking innocent round the door. But of course, I was caught. I made a sortie to get more toilet roll. While I was away, my mum came into the room with some washing. I returned to see her standing in the middle of the room, staring, her mouth yawning like the gates of hell, her glazed and fish-like eyes that saw but did not believe. Enshrined in the center of the floor-to-ceiling spattered vomitorium, Brahma floating uncomprehendingly through the eternal, primordial chaos, I remember those words as she turned and her eyes met mine. I remember the feel of the toilet roll between my fingers, clutched tightly as my aegis as I stuttered I was trying to clean. And there, backlit by the corruption crusting all 6 faces of my room, she mouthed, "Oh, my God.
Am I the a-hole for declining to walk my daughter down the aisle at her wedding?" About 8 years ago, I got a message on Facebook from a teenager asking if I knew her mother back in college, because she might be my kid. Now, after I got over the shock, I messaged her back, we talked a little bit, I paid for a DNA test, turns out I have a daughter, we'll call her Jenny. We talked for a little bit, I got to know her stepdad, Jim, and her mom, Tina, one night thing, I didn't even know her last name 25 years ago, and her younger half-siblings, and they're all pretty cool. In particular, cannot praise Jim enough, he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met, basically a human teddy bear, this guy. Overall, I'd say Jenny and I have a decent enough relationship. I never married, and I don't have any other children, so I've been taking her on vacations with me, and she spent a few holidays at my house, but overall our relationship is much more like that of 2 adults, rather than a parent and child. She doesn't call me dad, she calls Jim dad, and me Matt. I contributed to her college fund, but not as much as Jim and Tina did, and that wasn't as big a deal for me because I make a lot more money than they do and have no other kids. Last week, she called me to tell me that her long-term boyfriend proposed, and asked me to walk her down the aisle. I told her that I was honored, but that I didn't think it was fair for me to take that moment from Jim, who raised her since she was a toddler, just because we share DNA. She said that she actually wants both of us to walk her down the aisle, one on either side. I told her that I didn't think it was fair to ask him to share that moment either, and that even if Jim said he was okay with it, and I'm sure he would, because Jim wouldn't deny Jenny anything, no matter how much it hurt his feelings, it probably broke his heart for her to ask that. And she said okay, and hung up, but she hasn't been as happy to talk to me since. Am I wrong for saying no? Or do I just need to give her some time to adjust? How do you know if someone might be cheating? If they don't trust their partners. I've always been conventionally attractive, so a lot of guys don't want me around their partners. However, the only time guys have ever come near me was when they wanted to test something out. They'd tell me a long sob story about how their girlfriend is acting weird or distant and beg me to text them to see if they'll text back. The first time someone asked me to do this, I was hesitant to, but they offered a huge amount of cash just for 3 texts, so I did it. I texted their girl and I got a response pretty quickly. It was casual at first, until our back and forth conversation interested her enough that she asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. I sent a screenshot to her boyfriend and he was so grateful he sent me an extra $100. Supposedly he'd been asking her if she was cheating for months and she kept telling him that he was crazy. I guess this guy spread it around, because I started getting requests to loyalty test their girlfriends too. I didn't really want to keep messing with relationships, but every guy offered good money and I was going broke because of my gambling habits. So, every time a guy texted me I went on my dutiful way to text their girlfriends. I even set up a second social media page for the guys to text me on, so that the girls wouldn't suspect them. The usual text I'd get was about a paranoid boyfriend and a friendly girlfriend. But sometimes, the guy wants to propose but isn't sure if his girlfriend is as faithful as it seems. That's where I come in. What I say depends on what the girls like, but I usually start out with something basic like how do you feel about guys that make the first move. In my line of work, I've learned that 100% of girls prefer if a guy makes the first move, and this always interests them enough to reply. Immediately, I know that if they text back then they're not loyal, but my client would want more proof than that, so I keep the conversation going. So, I lead into asking where they're from because I want them to think we're from the same area. That way, I can ask her to meet up. Then, I make up some lame excuses like, I'm going to college there, or I have an internship in that state. I ask them if they could show me around, and they always say yes. That's when I drop the bomb and ask if they're single. They say yes and then they give me their number. Usually, it only takes 20 minutes for a girl to fold for me. They love to entertain the idea of seeing someone else, and don't shut down any of my advances like the boyfriend hopes they do. Though, There have been 2 girls who have rejected me in favor of their boyfriends, but for some reason, the relationship shortly failed after and I'd get a quick text in the middle of the night from the girls. But that's not even the craziest part. The thing is, I'm not even the one texting them. I've gotten a lot of money texting these girls, but I'm actually using an AI, so I put no real effort and they always fall for my tricks. None of the girls realize that they're falling for automated messages because of how casual and flirty the AI is. It sounds like a person is actually writing these texts. The best part though, is that the AI gives me the perfect location to take the girls to, no matter where they are. So, if a girl isn't falling for my usual tricks, I hit them with my trump card to make sure they're actually loyal. I tell them I'll take them out for a date to the best places near them. Girls love being spoiled, so if they reject the date, which they usually don't, that's how I really know how faithful she is. And if you're wondering how I present myself on social media that has girls who have never met me falling for me, I use the AI to make my profiles perfect. I give it a couple pictures to choose from, and it always gives me the ones where I look my best. But sometimes, looks aren't enough, so I use the AI to craft a bio for me that intrigues the ladies. I know a girl is checking out my profile when they text me asking me stuff I have written down on my bio. And if my bio catches their attention like I hope it does, they always stick around for the pictures I post. This plays a huge part in them falling for the loyalty test. But since I have to text a lot of girls and each one of them have different interests, it gets hard to think of what to say that will make them continue talking to me, so I always have the AI on hand to help me out. It never lets our conversations die down since it always knows what to say, and I can always choose how I want it to respond. Whether that be flirty, nerdy, or casual, etc., it all depends on the girl, but I'm getting paid either way. This started out as a side hustle, but now it's like my own small business, and it sure is a steal. So if you want to see if your girlfriend is cheating on you, just hit me up. I got you. Edit. For those asking me what AI I use an app called Pickup Pal for everything. It's the only dating assistant I've seen that has all the features I need.
Women who have rejected being proposed to. What was the aftermath? A few years ago I was dating a very controlling boyfriend. We were together for 2 years up to this point and we had talked about marriage and I told him I need at least 2 more years. I don't want to be married now. I want to spend a few years with him before we take that big step. He used to always express how he can't wait to marry me and wants to build a family together. Culture has an influence on his decision to want to get married, and he used to say he wants beautiful mixed babies with a beautiful black woman like me. He's told me plenty of times he sees no point waiting if we both want marriage. Well, he proposed while we were on holiday in Greece. I wasn't expecting it, he planned it well. It was beautiful. But I said no. He thought I was joking at first because with me when I'm angry, sad, happy, nervous, I laugh, so he wasn't exactly sure which emotion caused me to laugh. I laughed because I was shocked and nervous. Nervous because I was about to say no and shocked because I wasn't expecting it. I kept saying no and he realized I was serious. He got up from one knee and as he was rising he genuinely gave me an uppercut. He walked off and got a flight home that very day. I was sad, I felt violated and disrespected. We lived together at the time, so I was scared to go back into my apartment when I got a flight home the next day. I found his stuff missing, a note taped to the fridge claiming he still loves me, but since he can't be with me, he will love me from a distance, and he's moving back into his parents. Hence began the next year of stalking from him. I never got any peace and quiet. Constant calls and updates, seeing his car parked next to the restaurant if I went on a date with a guy and so on. I started collecting evidence for a restraining order. It all culminated about 10 months after the breakup. He showed up at my door intoxicated, with a knife. He barged his way in. That is when he decided to rope me at knife point. Thankfully for me, I had a camera set up in the living room in case he ever tried to break in, and I led him to the living room. I knew something awful would happen to me, but if I survived and the events took place in the living room, I would have irrefutable evidence. After the rope concluded, he laid hands on me, then left the house. To make a long story short, I was able to get him arrested and sentenced. I'm in therapy right now and dealing with a lot of trauma.
My parents want me to break up with my girlfriend. I started dating my girlfriend 9 months ago. I've known her for a long time because she is my best friend's sister. When we started dating, she told me that she can't have kids. She was surprised by the fact that I was okay with that. So we started dating and my parents were happy for me. So a week ago my parents invited her to stay and have dinner with us. During dinner my mom and my girlfriend were talking and suddenly my mom made a joke about us having children. My girlfriend tells her that she can't have kids and after she says this the mood changes. My parents stayed quiet and the only one that was trying to get everyone to talk again was my sister. After we were done having dinner my girlfriend left because she was uncomfortable. I asked if she wanted me to go with her but she told me that she was fine and left. After a while my parents told me that they want me to break up with her. I asked them for their reason and they told me that I should find someone who can provide me with children. This made me angry and I told them that they don't have a say in who I am with because they don't agree or don't like something. My dad just tells me that they want what's best for me but I just told them I'm not breaking up with her. We had a pretty big fight that night and it resulted in them telling me to either pick them or my girlfriend. My sister is the only one that is okay with me dating my girlfriend. She told me she is happy for me but that she also understands where our parents are coming from. Honestly, I don't really know what to do. I'm not breaking up with my girlfriend but I don't want to fight with my parents about it either. I just want them to accept her.
Something that just makes you go, who the heck figured this out? I've been getting into analog film photography, and the chemistry that goes into making the films is insane. Genuinely. How did they figure out which chemicals mixed in what combinations and temperatures would create the right colors? It's no wonder that even at its peak, only a handful of companies worldwide could mass-produce color films. How wireless works and radios work. I have a solid understanding of wireless, security, networking, and everything that goes with it as an IT person for the last 25 years. The fact that my computer or cell phone can talk without any wires attached is magic. I've read about it, tried to understand, but how did someone figure this out? Whipped cream. Who figured out that if you mix thick cream for long enough, eventually the consistency will change into a fluffy paste? Why did someone then take their ruined cream and discover that it's great with vanilla and sugar, and should be used generously over dessert items? Seems like a lot of experimentation, or rescuing a botched attempt at something else to arrive at the thing that we know it is today. Whoever it was, thank you so much for the delicious condiment.
Has acting on a gut feeling ever saved your life? I once dated someone who was so awful thinking of him makes me nauseous. At the time I really didn't see anything wrong with him, which is typical for most narcissists. They're always great at first. The more time went on, the more I started to feel off about him. My gut was starting to tell me that something wasn't right, but I kept telling myself he would change. It wasn't his fault, he went through a lot, blah blah. This guy was constantly telling me what I needed to change about myself and was always so secretive about things. Fast forward 2 weeks, my gut just felt completely off. I had the worst feeling, and so I logged onto his Facebook, and there it all was. Over 20 women that he was talking to, some that he even met up with. I also went as far as opening up his drawers, and all the way jammed in the back were pills, stolen credit cards, and a gun. He came into the room and saw the open Facebook Messenger, and all the things I found in his drawers. He was so open about it all, like it was no big deal. I was mortified of the person that was standing in front of me. He just told me to get over it, that he was only doing all of that stuff because I wasn't giving him enough attention. That night I left and never looked back. Later on I found out a lot more horrible things about this guy, and I really believe those gut feelings saved my life, because who knew what could have happened if I had stayed. Nurses of Reddit, what were the most haunting things someone said on their deathbed? I had a patient whose memory had been fading for years. It's weird, right before a patient dies, sometimes they'll suddenly be doing a lot better. Anyway, he thought I was his late wife. I played along and just listened to him while he recalled his engagement, his wedding, his first childbirth, and a few other memories for me. At one point, he says, "Oh, Irene, there you are. Sorry, you know my eyes aren't as good as they used to be." Well, thank you for listening to an old man tell his stories. I hope you have great stories to tell one day too. I'm coming, Irene. And then he passed. He was my first longtime patient. I had to tell my grandmother that dialysis would only give her another week or so to live, and it was her choice to try or not. She was in and out of consciousness at that point and was in a clear state for the moment. She asked, "Will I die?" I said, "Yes." She looked me in the eye and smiled just a little and said, "Sometimes you gotta do what you don't want to do." She closed her eyes, squeezed my hand, and slept until she passed a day later. When things get hard, I always hear her say, "Sometimes you gotta do what you don't want to do."
I was stabbed, and now my soon-to-be ex-husband wants to cancel the divorce. My soon-to-be ex-husband and I had been married for 12 years. We got married at 22. About 4 months ago he asked me for a divorce after confessing to me that he was having an affair and that he was in love with his female best friend. I never liked her and have asked him to reduce the amount of time he spent with her, to stop going on one-on-one dinners with her, but he refused. At first I took it badly, and my husband actually asked to open the relationship so he could be with us both at the same time. It was when he asked me that I realized my marriage had died, and no amount of begging for him to change was ever going to make him take his actions back and love me again. I decided to start the divorce proceedings. However, his mother got sick at around that time. I had to take care of her at night since the lady is quite picky with other people. She always treated me badly and never welcomed me as the wife of her son, but I still took care of her. This delayed the divorce a bit, and in hindsight I guess they were using me as a nurse or babysitter. A month and a half ago I was walking to work. It was about 6 a.m. A man in an all-black outfit ran up to me and stabbed me. He did it 3 times. Once in my stomach, and twice in my arms. I didn't have much with me, just my cell phone and about $10. He robbed the phone and $10. The area was secluded, but I had the strength to yell for help, and luckily a random man came across me. He gave me his phone and called the ambulance and my husband. I wanted my husband with me, regardless of anything. It's been a while and I'm now better. My husband now doesn't want a divorce. He says that this altercation opened his eyes and that he really can't imagine a life without me. It was going to be an uncontested divorce since this type of divorce is totally free in my country and I'm stingy enough to not want to pay a lawyer's fees, but now he doesn't want a divorce. I'm living with my mother and my soon-to-be ex-husband comes over every day to screw up my existence. What do I do?
What's something that sucks about being a man? 13 years ago I brought my newborn son home from hospital and began to raise him as a single dad. With no extended family to help, I was on a steep learning curve but totally focused on doing my absolute best for my son. We spent many days going out shopping, at parks, play centers, museums, galleries, restaurants, swimming pools, anywhere babies were allowed. I got used to the casual assumption from people that I was separated/divorced and enjoying an access day with my son. A major problem away from home was my son's habit of soiling his nappy, or diaper I believe in the S. A typical exchange would go, "Excuse me, are there any baby changing facilities please?" To which the general reply was, "Yes sir, they're in the women's toilets." My reply being, "Are there any facilities not reserved for mother/female carers?" Was usually met with, "No, I'm sorry," with a wide-eyed implication of why on earth should there be? What male would want to change a nappy at a restaurant/leisure center/swimming pool? So, off I'd go to the men's toilets, go in a cubicle, and change him on my lap. No purpose-made changing table, nappy dispenser, nappy bin etc. on occasion. The look of shock and suspicion on other men's faces as I'd emerge from a toilet cubicle with a baby/toddler shrieked, "What the F? Is this guy a pedophile? What's been going on in there? Shall I call the police?" When my son was at crawling stage, I took him to a government-funded children's center, and booked him in for a stay-and-play session. I was trying to maximize the amount of time my son got to socialize with other kids. On the appointed day, we turned up for the session and I was asked who would be staying at the session with him. When the staff realized I would be with him, I was told no. My son had to be accompanied by his mother. When told that he has no mother or other living female relative, I was told that unless I could find a female to accompany him, he would not be allowed to attend. However, the center did have a dad's day, usually spent playing sport and games at the local park. My son was still too young to even walk. I used to take advantage of cheap foreign holidays during term time when my son was preschool. Passport control always involved my son being asked where his daddy was. Hotel staff would look awkward and uncomfortable checking a single man into a room with a small boy. I fully understand the reasoning here, but understanding never lessened the discomfort and embarrassment. I believe things are a little easier now in the UK. I see changing facilities in some malls, separate from the toilets, but still often labeled mother and baby facilities or similar. I still see advertising for mother and baby activities, groups, forums etc. Mumsnet, a great forum for parents. Mothercare, great shop for baby accessories etc. Mother and baby club, great opportunity for mums/babies to socialize. I know being a single mum is hard, but in my experience, I believe being a single dad can be even harder. Signs she's not into you. 1. She doesn't text you back. Women are communicative. If you text a girl, and she likes you, chances are, she will reply to you. And soon. If she isn't answering your text messages, that is a surefire sign that she just isn't that into you. 2. She avoids being alone with you. If she always says things like "I'll meet you there," or if she never wants to hang out alone with you or at your house, she probably doesn't like you. 3. She doesn't ask you any personal questions. If a woman isn't mystified and curious about you as a man, odds are basically zero that she's going to be interested in you. 4. She tries to tell you all her bad qualities. Pointing out all her faults is a way to tell you that you should find someone who is better suited for you, or that she is just not into you. 5. She doesn't care about the topics you're discussing. If she doesn't seem to care about anything you're talking about, odds are good that you just need to accept that this particular woman probably isn't the woman for you and move on. 6. She is always busy. If she is constantly telling you that she can't possibly get together because she is so busy, then you may want to consider that she is making up excuses because she doesn't want to see you. 7. She just doesn't pay attention. If her attention is primarily on anything other than you, and if she doesn't seem excited to be spending time with you, that's the number one universal sign that you're not her number one choice. 8. She flirts with other guys around you. Almost always, if a girl is flirting with another guy completely oblivious to your presence, chances are, the girl doesn't like you back. 9. She doesn't flirt with or touch you. If she can be around you without wanting to reach out and touch you, then there is little chance that she is interested in you. 10. You're the one making all the effort.
When did you realize that one of your family members was a horrible person? One day after my husband died, my only sister's oldest daughter came for dinner. We were all chatting, reminiscing about things when she mentioned how her mother used to pick her up by the neck with her feet dangling, screaming into her face extremely close. She said this happened a few times when she was younger. She's now a grown adult and doing very well. I knew my sister had a temper, but never to the point she would abuse her child. I cried when my niece told me and wished she would have told me when it happened, as I would have done something about it. She could have gone to live with her father if I would have known. I found this out about 9 years ago and it still brings tears to my eyes. It was then that I could not have any real relationship with my sister, who basically hated me by that point anyway. I used to try, but she had claimed my life was always easy. I got pregnant and married at 18 right out of high school. Found out I had stage 3 cancer when my youngest was a year old. Helped my mother when dad died of cancer with my 3 little children almost every day. Was there with mom when my grandmother passed. Had my baby pass away within 24 hours of birth. And my husband died due to cancer. If that is an easy life, I would hate to know what a hard life is in her eyes.
I don't believe my friend's domestic abuse claims. This happened pretty recently and the whole situation is very strange to me. I've known 2 other couples that have gone through a similar accusation and I believed everything there, but with this one, stuff just doesn't feel right. It's mostly down to how she, Janet, and her partner, Josh, have acted about the whole thing. Josh was absolutely appalled at the accusation and has since broken up with Janet and cut all ties and contact to her and anyone that has taken her side, which I guess he thinks I do because I can't talk to him. Meanwhile, Janet acts like this act of abuse was just a little tiff they had. She's mentioned that she wants to work it out and stay together. I'm aware of how the cycle of abuse works, that victims will still stay with their abusers, but they also downplay the abuse. Janet isn't exactly. She's not underselling the details of the accusation at all, just acting like it's not a big deal. I've never heard of that specific combination of traits and it's very strange. Oh, it was horrible, he did all this stuff to me and I'm scared of him and he's violent and bad. But also we could stay together. Plus it's Josh that broke the relationship off and is doing his best to break contact and keep her away, which seems backwards. And I think the biggest thing that has my suspicion bells going off is that the couple had just recently gone through a very tragic miscarriage. Both of them were really excited to be parents and they were obviously floored when it happened. The timing of that happening and then this accusation is just fishy to me. At the end of the day though, it doesn't matter who is right. Like I said, Josh has cut ties with me and Janet is still around in the friend group. Josh isn't trying to tell his side of the story to us, so everyone is really just left with the option of going along with what Janet says. Myself included. I haven't really told anyone my suspicions and hang-ups about the whole thing. It wouldn't do any good and he's gone anyway. I just don't really have anyone to say this to. And like I said, it really doesn't matter what I think really happened at the end of the day. Personally, it seems more likely to me that the relationship just didn't mail it through the miscarriage and Janet is just saying this cause she doesn't want to face that. Which is a shifty thing to lie about if true, but it's not like she's pressing charges as far as I know. And I'm never going to tell any of our friends or Janet my doubts. All it would do is lose me more friends. My friend tried to set me up with his coworker's daughter, but I got with her mom instead. My friend, 30 male, recently informed me, 28 male, that one of his coworkers, an older woman, asked him if he knew anyone who would be interested in what she called her chronically single daughter, 25. The woman apparently regarded my friend as a decent young man and figured he would most likely be friends with other decent young men. The reason the woman didn't ask my friend if he might be interested in her daughter was because my friend was in a relationship. My friend informed the woman that he might know a guy. Cue the part where I came in. My friend called me and asked if I would be keen to get to know his coworker's daughter. My first response was to request photos to get an idea of what the daughter looked like. My friend didn't have photos of the daughter, but he did have a name and surname for me to search online. I liked what I saw when I scanned through the daughter's social media. She was really attractive and seemed like fun. I made my friend aware that I was interested. My friend asked for my permission to share a few photos of me with his coworker, also known as the mom, so she could share it with her daughter. I said sure. A few days later, my friend contacted me to share the feedback he received from his coworker. Based on my friend's feedback, the daughter was still in the dark about my existence because the mom suddenly decided that she first wanted to meet me in order to gauge if I would be good enough for her daughter. And just like that, I lost interest. I was in no mood to meet the mom to get vetted and thus stopped caring about the whole matchmaker thing. There were easier ways to meet girls without a middleman or a middle mom. I was on the verge of tapping out, but my friend, who was still fully invested for some reason, managed to change my mind and convince me to go through with it after reminding me of how long it's been since my last relationship. My meeting with the mom happened a couple of days ago. I could see where the daughter got her looks from. From the moment the mom opened her mouth and bombarded me with loaded questions about my life, I sensed something between us. I thought it was my imagination until my meeting with the mom continued in my bedroom. For the record, the mom established she was single prior to my penis entering the picture. I had no post-nut clarity regret when we were done effing, but the same could not be said about the mom. She cut our cuddling sessions short and proceeded to get dressed as fast as possible. I asked her why she was leaving so soon after we had what I thought was good intimacy. She said her daughter was off limits from that moment onwards and asked if I understood what off limits meant. I said yes and asked the mom if she was off limits too or just her daughter. She looked at me like I was a kid asking his parent for a puppy before telling me that we were not compatible and therefore better off going our separate ways. I asked the mom if not compatible was a reference to the age gap between us. She laughed like she expected me to bring up the age difference. When I asked her to fill me in on what was so funny, she said she could literally list all the things that made us incompatible based on the answers I gave her when she was getting to know me and the experience she had getting to F me. Not gonna lie, she was beginning to get under my skin at that point, so I challenged her to share at least 5 things that supposedly made us incompatible. She accepted the challenge and shared more than 5 things. This is what I remember from her list. I habitually bite my fingernails. I avoid the gym. I still look forward to Christmas presents from my parents. I'm oddly obsessed with koalas. I hate sushi. I never learned how to swim. I smoke weed. I'm friends with my ex. I travel to work using a skateboard. I struggle to parallel park when I'm not using my skateboard. I'm too quiet during intimacy. I seem to think playing Rammstein during intimacy is the same as not being quiet. I was unable to make her bust more than 5 times in under an hour. I asked the mom what made her sleep with me if she had so many reasons not to. She said I kind of reminded her of the first boy she hooked up with in high school. I said and? She said it was old feelings she had to get out of her system. I asked her if I was nothing more than a nostalgia F. She advised me not to put a label on what happened and to forget about her and her daughter forever. This post is proof that I'm struggling to forget. Not only did this woman leave me feeling used and a little insecure, she's also avoiding my friend at work and now he's low-key blaming me for contributing to an uncomfortable working environment. F my life.
My 12-year-old son revealed his dad's cheating habits to me. Please help. Today, my husband went on a work trip. While he was away, my youngest son, who is 12 years old, came up to me when we were alone. He seemed nervous and told me something shocking. He said he saw dad talking to many girls on his phone. He even mentioned that Dad got pictures from them, like selfies in front of mirrors or in their cars. Dad uses Snapchat to chat with them, and he noticed that Dad started hiding his phone when he got messages from them. My son wanted me to know this because he was worried about how it might make me feel. He reassured me that I am a great mom and wife. He gave me a hug to comfort me. I tried my best to answer his questions, explaining things in a way that a 12-year-old could understand. My son was upset with his dad for doing this. Unfortunately, my husband has cheated on me before, and we even got divorced because of it. After he promised to change, we got back together. But last October, someone sent me messages showing my husband and another woman talking inappropriately on Snapchat. They sent videos and pictures and said they missed each other. My husband cried and begged me not to leave, saying it was all online and they never met in person. He agreed to go to therapy and take medication, and things seemed better for a while. Recently, though, he started posting a lot of selfies and making TikToks about himself. It felt strange because married guys usually don't do that. I thought I might be paranoid and pushed those thoughts aside. Now, I'm pretty sure he's back to his old ways. I want to talk to him about it, but I don't want to mention what our son told me. My husband is good at lying and might deny it. Plus, I don't have any proof. Should I talk to a lawyer instead of confronting him? I was diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and panic disorder today, which makes this even harder. I know I need to do some self-work, but I don't deserve this. Leaving him may be the best choice, but I'm not sure how to go about it without concrete proof.
I just had a baby with the wrong woman. Jess and I have been together for 3 years and now we've started to think about having a baby. She said it was her lifelong dream to be a mother and wanted to be able to be a stay-at-home mom for at least 2 years before working again. I obliged because who was I to deny my wife's wishes? So we tried for a baby, and tried, and tried. We didn't know what was wrong, but I could see it was taking a toll on Jess's mental health. She believed there was something wrong with her, that maybe she was infertile. So we both got tests done to see what the problem was. Except, there was nothing wrong with either of our bodies. This gave Jess new hope and she insisted we try more frequently. There wasn't a day where we didn't try. Now as a man, I know I should be happy to be having intimacy this much, but holding Jess during aftercare every single time made me realize I didn't want this at all. I wasn't ready to be a father. Kids are so much responsibility, and because Jess wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, that meant I had to work extra hard to provide for 3 people. Baby things are not cheap in the slightest, and there were so many things I wanted to do with Jess before we did something with this level of commitment. She always talked about seeing the 7 wonders of the world and I always wanted to take her to do that. But this baby puts a halt in those plans. Because I didn't really want to confide in anybody that I knew about these things, I hired a therapist. So for 3 days every week after work, I would go talk to my therapist. She was this woman who carried herself with confidence, and I knew she contained so much wisdom in that head of hers. She was only a few years older than me too, so it really impressed me that she could give me all this advice that would help me improve my life. So, after beating around the bush for a week, my therapist told me to just spill it. She knew I was holding something back, the real reason I didn't want this baby. It wasn't the expenses, or the long work hours. No, it went much deeper than that. She wanted to dissect my brain piece by piece and inspect it in a way that would make her understand all my thoughts. I allowed her, of course, because this is what I was paying her to do. Some advice she gave me was to just stop and look. Stop and listen to the world around me. Don't move too quickly or else I might miss the bane of my existence. So I did just that. Whenever I was in a crowded place or I was feeling overwhelmed, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and listened. I did this several times, and each time, it brought a smile to my face. I felt at ease because I would always see this woman. She had long black hair, a diamond-shaped face, and eyes so brown they resembled the dark void I always found myself in. Just seeing her smile melted my heart. Hell, it could have the ability to melt any cold heart out there. Seeing her was like seeing art displayed in a museum where you're so captivated by it you just stop and stare to admire every single perfection and every little flaw. Seeing her so often made me realize this mysterious woman wasn't so mysterious. Because she had black hair and a diamond face, I chalked it up to it being Jess. But upon closer inspection, I realized it was actually my ex Rachel. I panicked, but when that happened, I was told to stop and look, but that would mean I had to see Rachel, which would cause me to panic. It was a looped cycle. At my next appointment, I told my therapist of my dilemma and she said that's why I can't have this baby with Jess. I'm still attached to Rachel. That's when I realized I wasn't over Rachel as I thought I was, because whenever I looked at anything, I would get random flashes of Rachel with the exact thing I was looking at. I dreaded going home now, wondering what would cause me to slip up, or if I had to tell Jess about it. I never could, not when she was so happy that she was ovulating and we had intimacy, which resulted in her finally getting the baby she wanted. For 9 months, I would have to keep this secret to myself because there was just no way I would tell a pregnant Jess that I was thinking about another woman when we were getting ready to be a family. The guilt never subsided as the months went on, and everything got worse 8 months in. I had decided to skip my therapy session after work one day. I was still in therapy because I needed someone to tell my problems to, since Jess wasn't an option, not just because I didn't want to see how she would react, but because she was pregnant and had to deal with her own problems. So, I go to a random bar nowhere near where I live, hoping that an iced drink would help me clear my thoughts. Except when I went up to the bartender, I think I stopped to listen because the woman's face from before appeared in front of me. There was that same warm smile and eyes that were the windows to my soul, leaving me entranced. There was something different this time, though. This time, she spoke. "Hi, how can I help you?" she asked. I blinked, and realized I was actually face to face with Rachel. I kind of stared at her like a fish out of water and she laughed. "Don't be so surprised to see me, Ben," she said. There was no doubt about it. That was Rachel, as I live and breathe. My Rachel. I apologized and ordered my drink. It was a slow night at the bar, so she took the opportunity to sit with me and talk. We reminisced about our time together and talked about what our lives look like now. She's single, but living with her best friend in an apartment she was more than happy to give me the address to. She was radiating and refreshing to see. It wasn't until I blabbed that my wife was having a baby that she suddenly needed to get back to work. I felt dumb for mentioning that, as it ruined our conversation, but I took it as a sign to go home to my wife. I tried my best not to visit Rachel after finding out where she worked, but I didn't try hard enough and I found myself skipping my therapy sessions to be with her. Eventually, we exchanged phone numbers, but I tried not to text her too often because I knew my wife wasn't going to be happy about it. A month later, my wife gave birth, but I wasn't experiencing the joys and miracles of childbirth. Instead, doubt lied deep in me and a bundle of anxiety kept creeping in my stomach. This wasn't right, none of it. The baby was then put into one of those little beds with all their identification on it. Something took over me at that moment and I found myself snapping a picture of the baby. Then I did something stupid. I went to Rachel's contact and sent her the picture along with the message, "It should have been you."
My best friend told me that I don't have a real job as a babysitter, but she got upset when I told her I make way more than her because I have a real salary. I have a degree in early childhood education. Some examples of jobs you can have with this degree are preschool teacher, kindergarten teacher, nanny, childcare, daycare worker, and special education teacher. I love kids and impacting their lives, which is why I chose to get the degree I did. But as most people know, at least in the US, teachers are very underpaid. And daycare workers are paid even less than that. The original plan when I was nearing the end of my degree was that I was going to find a job as a preschool teacher. Even though the pay wouldn't be that great, it would be okay because my fiancé makes very good money, and we are both good at saving, so it wouldn't be that big of a deal. After graduating, I began my job search for a preschool teacher role, but along the way, a wealthy family asked me to be their nanny for their 2 children, an infant and a toddler. When I say they are rich, I mean wealthy. The pay they offered me is above anything I would ever make as a teacher. So, I accepted the nannying job. I work Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. while the parents are at work. I love this job, and I lucked out. Aside from paying me incredibly well, they are also an amazing family to work for. They are so nice, and they treat me so well. The mom once told me, "We don't even view you as a nanny. We view you as an extension of our family because you are in our home caring for our kids." On top of it, both of the kids are so great. I have benefits such as health, dental, and vision insurance, an IRA for retirement, a certain amount of paid vacation days a year, a certain amount of paid sick days a year and paid holidays off for all holidays. I also don't have to buy myself breakfast or lunch because they tell me to help make whatever I want in their kitchen. Anyway, my best friend has a degree in human resources and works as an HR specialist. We were hanging out after work yesterday and got on the topic of our jobs. At one point, she said, "Don't you want to use your degree for a real job instead of babysitting?" That annoyed me. Still, I didn't want to fight, so I just explained to her that I was not just babysitting. With the infant, I'm doing things like teaching him how to roll, teaching him how to sit up, tummy time, feeding him, changing his diaper, and putting him down for his naps. With the toddler, I'm potty training her, teaching her how to count, teaching her the alphabet, working on fine and gross motor skills, creating lesson plans that are educational but engaging, and teaching her a ton of stuff. So, I am using the knowledge from my degree. The only difference is that a family is paying me to teach and care for their children in their home instead of working in a classroom for a school. She then commented on how I'd make more money doing something else. I said, "No. They pay me well above what I could ever make doing anything else in the teaching field." She then asked me how much they paid me, and since we are so close, I didn't mind telling her. Once she learned how much I make, she got visibly upset, so I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "Well, apparently, you make way more than I do when you don't even have a real job." I have never asked her what she makes, so I had no clue that I was making more than her, let alone significantly more, so I didn't mean to upset her. But she asked, so I answered. I'm still upset about her comments about my not having a real job.
Who is the most disturbing individual you have ever met? To this day, I have no idea if my dad did it. I wouldn't blame him if he did. A week or so before my 10th birthday, I walked to the corner store with a $5 bill and picked up a jar of ragu for my mom. On my way home, a man I'd never seen before fell in step with me and began talking. "Hi," he said, cheerfully. "My name is Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?" I walked along silently, not replying and fervently hoping he would take that as a sign he should leave me alone. Subtleties were not his strong suit, though, because he kept right on chattering. "Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you? Of course, you're almost a big girl now, you'll be needing another kind of doctor soon, won't you? That's okay though. They can still bring you to me until then. What's your name? You have beautiful hair. I was just on my way to get some suckers for the candy jar in my office. Do you like suckers?" Thankfully, we were nearing my house, so I ran forward, up the back steps and into through the kitchen door. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of a very long, very scary ordeal. It didn't take long after that for Dr. Ramsey to begin showing up. At first, it seemed benign enough, at least to a kid. He would drive by nearly every day, smiling and waving. I told my mom, who said maybe it was on his way home from work. But then, the phone calls began. My dad called me into the living room, and sat me down. He asked about the day Dr. Ramsey followed me home, and if I talked to him. He said I wasn't in trouble, but that I needed to tell him the truth. I told him no, and he asked if I was sure. I told him no again, and he frowned, then asked, "Then how does he know your name?" I didn't know. It turns out, that was not all he knew. He knew my sister's name as well. Pretty soon, neither my sister nor I were allowed to answer the phone. He called several times a day. At first, neither of us knew what he was saying. Then, one night, one of my brothers told us that he was telling my parents that he was going to hurt me, and later my sister. Things got complicated after that. My dad had called the police, but as this was before there were any stalking laws, there was not a lot they could do. They told my parents to call back if he tried anything. My dad then called a friend of his from back in the day, who happened to be a cop. For the next month, my dad's friend escorted me to and from school. Suddenly, life as I knew it came screeching to a halt. I couldn't walk to school alone, I couldn't play outside, I couldn't walk to 7 to 11. When access to me was completely denied, things escalated. It was around this time he began threatening my sister as well. Then one afternoon my sister, 2 of my brothers, my mom and I were all in the kitchen. One of my brothers saw a glimpse of someone in the garage. They'd seen him too. Dr. Ramsey came bolting out of the garage, my brothers chasing after him. They ran all the way to Cherokee Park, where he lost them in the trees. My parents called the police again, but nothing came of it. The only information they had was a description, and the fake name Dr. Ramsey. A couple of weeks later, we woke to find our dog hanging from the side porch. She was a gorgeous saddleback German Shepherd, born the same day I was. We were all devastated. The cops said there was no evidence it was him, and ruled it accidental, but none of us believed that. His phone calls became more informative in the meantime. He would talk about who was home, and who wasn't. If my brother would say my dad was home, he would tell him who was really in the house. He also would talk about the house itself. About the window in the kitchen he could easily open with a wedge from the outside even when it was locked, and about the French doors that connected the living room to the side porch and how the lock could be opened from the outside if you jiggled it just right. That night, my dad put in some carpenter nails at the bottom of the French doors until he could get a new lock ordered. My parents had to go to a company event for my dad's work. My older brothers were at Saints West roller skating rink. My sister was on the phone with her best friend. My little brother was on the floor asleep. I was watching Devo on the midnight special with Wolfman Jack. It was late. Suddenly, the top of the French doors swung inward, and in the few milliseconds, before the nails in the bottom caused them to snap back, I could see his silhouette. My sister whipped the phone at the television, and we ran up the stairs. About halfway up, we realized our little brother was still asleep on the living room floor. As quietly as we could, we slipped back down the stairs to get him. We all went into our bedroom and didn't turn on the light, this way we could see outside. We watched out the window for a while, and when we didn't find him, we crept down the hall to our brother's room to look. We looked down and could see someone standing at the back door. He knocked, loudly. "What do you want?" My sister asked out the window. He stepped back and said, "Is this the Mercy residence? I have a pizza for delivery. Can you come to the door?" She scoffed at him, declaring she was not stupid, she could see he didn't have a pizza, and she was calling the cops. He left. A short while later, my brothers returned home. We told them what happened and they walked around the yard, watching for him. They came back in, and things settled down. By now we'd pretty much given up calling the cops because it never helped, so we just went back in, each of us carrying a knife from the kitchen just in case. Eventually, one of my brothers went into the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal as a snack. You know that sensation you get when you can just feel someone watching you? Yeah, he had that in spades. He kept looking around the kitchen, through the doorway into the dining room, at the windows. He didn't see anything, but he could still feel eyes on him, so he went closer to the door to try to see better. The kitchen lights were reflecting on the windows of the door, so he still couldn't see. He stepped closer, then closer again, until he was right up to the door, then cupped his hands on either side of his head so he could see. There on the other side of the window pane was Dr. Ramsey, smiling back at him. He turned to yell for my older brothers, and when he looked back again, he was gone. They went out again to look for him, but didn't see him. The next night we were at the table playing Crazy Eights, and my brother was restless. My sister asked him what's wrong, and he said he always felt like any minute now Dr. Ramsey could show up. Almost immediately after he finished his sentence, we all heard boom 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 on the window right behind him. In the chaos, the 2 eldest ran out, but he was already gone. A couple of weeks later, I was at school and we were outside on the playground during recess. I was swinging upside down when I saw that now familiar blue Ford Galaxy cruising by, moving slowly. There he was, smiling and waving. He called my name, and I ran to the teacher and told her. The school had been told all about him, and she took me inside right away and called my mom. That same day my mom had gotten a call from the school office asking her to verify that my dad was picking me up, as he'd called to say he was on his way. He wasn't. Not long after that, I woke up one night, thirsty. I went down to the kitchen for a drink and there, sitting alone in the dark, was my dad. On the table, he had his 9mm. He was tired of the police waiting until Dr. Ramsey tried something. He was tired of his children being terrorized. He was tired of being afraid every time he left for work that something would happen to us while he was gone. I sat with him for a time, watching, before he sent me back to bed. As suddenly as it began, it was over. He had vanished from our lives. The phone calls, the drive-by with the creepy waves, everything. For a long time, during and after the Dr. Ramsey days, I would have a recurring nightmare in which I would wake up to find him standing over me as I slept. It took a long time before I felt like a kid again. I found out years later that when he was calling, Dr. Ramsey would tell my parents that he was going to abuse and hurt me and my sister, and that there was nothing they could do about it. I don't know what happened to him when he disappeared. I don't know if he was in a car wreck, locked in prison, or in a coma. Sometimes I wonder if the wait ended for my dad when he was sitting in the darkened kitchen one night. I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to.
For more stories, head over to my YouTube channel, link in bio.
They kicked out my sister-in-law when she came out, so I forced them to sell the same house. My sister-in-law came out as a trans woman when she was 18. My wonderful in-laws kicked her out of the house then and there. They told her to leave the house and threw her out at 8 p.m. with no money or even any documents, and her father took the car keys from her too. She had to walk 8 miles to get to our place. She was crying, and we took her in. This is horrible behavior, but my husband and I would have just cut them off if it was all they did, but they doubled down. They refused to hand over any of the documents, and my brother-in-law had to go over and barge into their house to get them. They also cleaned up all the money in a joint account. She had saved up $8,000 working part-time all through high school. They took the money and also sold her car, which was in their name. They were trying to ruin her life as much as they could. My father-in-law is a small-time businessman, and his biggest account was supplying my employer. I had helped him get the contract, and it was very lucrative for him. My employer was a family business, and they treated long-term employees more like family than as employees. I was talking to my boss about what happened. He told me that if I could find someone within the 5% range of the price my father-in-law offered, they would make the switch. My father-in-law offered us really great rates. He was very good at his job, but he had fucked up the contract because even though we always bought from him, we weren't obligated to buy from him. We could switch suppliers anytime, but he got complacent and assumed we wouldn't switch suppliers. It took me 6 months of painful searching to find a supplier who could replace him and get us great rates. This was not a major part of my duties, and I had to put in way more hours than normal to find the damn supplier, but when I did find them, I waited for a month before informing my boss. See, my in-laws had been planning to do a major renovation for a long time, and it involved tearing down a major portion of their house. I waited after the house was torn down to tell my boss. We started to get supplies from the new supplier the next month. It crushed his business. It fucked his unit economics, and he had to scramble to find new customers. They ended up having to sell their house to save the business, and they didn't get a good rate for it because the house was half torn down when they sold it. My in-laws did try to get money from my brother-in-law, but he told them to fuck off. My father-in-law is a decent businessman, and he did crawl his way out of the hole they dug for themselves, but even 8 years later, they still haven't bought a new house. I have heard they are still sour about what happened. I mean, I was just doing my job, and if they had just kicked her out, they would still have the house. Threw a rock at a dead body on the way home from school. About 6 years ago, I was in my final year of high school, and due to the weird timetable that 12th grade had at my school, we regularly had 2-hour breaks between classes, early finishes, and longer lunch breaks. My house was about a 20-minute walk away from school, and I would usually just walk home either by myself or with a friend and chill until we had to head back. My school was located on the outskirts of the city, and my house was a little bit further out. I lived on about 40 acres on a dirt road. Along the dirt road, I passed a really foul smell about 5 minutes away from my house. I couldn't tell where the smell was coming from, but it was definitely close to the road. I had passed this smell about 4 times over roughly a week of school, but figured it was a dead animal due to the area. After an exam, I was walking home with a friend and the smell was worse than ever, so as you do, we decided to walk into the grass to search for whatever the smell was. We ended up finding a black garbage bag that was completely blown up like a balloon about 5 meters from the road. As a joke, I threw a rock at it and it popped and shot out this foul white goo, and immediately, my friend and I started dry reaching. We ran away as fast as we could, laughing and vomiting, back home to my place. I didn't think anything of it as I figured it was a cat or something that someone had dumped. I remember walking back from school the next week, by myself, and there were mounted police on their horses walking down the road slowly, and near one of the entrances to my property, there was a dog squad with sniffer dogs walking around. I didn't take much notice of all the police and what they were doing, but literally as soon as I got closer to the area where we had found the bag, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach and I thought, oh crap. The bag ended up being the body of a girl who had been unalived and was dumped along the fence line of my property. I still feel sick when I think about it. Ruin my sister's only birth experience? I'll make sure you never forget her. When I was 14 and my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time. Sarah had a horrible pregnancy, about 16 to 18 weeks, and the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which if you don't know is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain, she developed gestational diabetes, and just all around hated the experience. Around this time Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, your body is built to do this, it can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it, because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, my sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section and while doing the operation discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumor. When I say large I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now while Sarah was in for surgery Paul was taking care of everything baby related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork as she should have been out of surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get her rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name. And still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, who was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him, but Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid but there wasn't much she could do so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later, took a vacation with my best friend and I've realized she is the dumbest person I've ever met. I'm a guy and have a female best friend, we've been friends for quite a while, never dated and I have a girlfriend. We are both in college and I don't know how she is even in college after spending a week with her, like I literally don't know how she's gotten this far in life, and no clue how she's going to get a career job. To point out some things, she was telling me about how she is starting to get depression and anxiety. I then asked her to look at her screen time and the girl is spending 7.5 hours a day on social media, that's almost as much time as a full-time job, and she doesn't see how that's damaging her mental health. We were getting ready to leave the house and took a bunch of food out of the fridge to put it in a cooler. She said we absolutely cannot take any ice out of the freezer. I looked at her with a confused look on my face and asked why. She said she didn't want to use up all the ice. I then had to explain to her how the freezer makes ice. We had some beers left over in the fridge. I asked her if she wanted to split the beers between us. She had no clue what I meant, so I had to explain to her that she would take half of the beers and I would take the other half. She drove through some mud that was on the road from some contractors in the neighborhood and then parked on the driveway. It rained the next day. Mud from the car got on the driveway. No big deal. She went to hose it off and then asked for my help. She said it wasn't coming off, and I had to tell her that it's not like a pressure washer where it will remove the dirt in a few seconds, and that she just has to hold it there for a while and eventually all the dirt will come off the driveway. I checked the oil in her car since she drove 8 hours to this place and it wasn't reading on the dipstick. I told her she needed to add a bit of oil but she said she didn't need any because it's not due for an oil change yet. I had to explain to her that older cars will burn oil, and she's at risk of blowing her engine with it being this low on oil. She took a hot baking sheet out of the oven and asked where to put it. I said on the stove. It's meant to withstand very hot things, she said, but it's a gas stove and the stove isn't on. Will it damage it? As we were cleaning up, there was an empty beer box. She asks me, do you want this box? Me, What in the world do I want an empty beer box for? I will still probably be friends with her, but I don't think I will ever be able to go on another trip with her again. I literally lost brain cells from spending a week with her. She is oblivious to every single thing and what I call clinically dumb. She wants to be a police officer, but I do not see that happening. I once had her handle my 9mm handgun, and once it went off she started screaming and waving it in every direction with her finger still on the trigger and fully loaded. The girl needs so much growing up to do. I don't know if she will ever get super far in life, sadly. I'd love to help and I challenge her to think critically, but she refuses to make any lifestyle changes that will benefit her, such as reading, cutting back on screen time, cutting back on going to bars with her sorority friends, going on some walks in the park, etc. She is the most stereotypical dumb sorority blonde you see in movies. I never thought there was anyone that dumb in real life, but she has proven me wrong.
My boyfriend stole my medication to save me. Long story extremely short, I had an accident a couple weeks ago and needed surgery. Since it was relatively invasive, I was prescribed an opiate to take for my pain. My boyfriend, who I've been with for a few months, has been helping me with basic things that I was having trouble with right after surgery. He, as well as other members of his family, have had issues with addiction, and he made it very clear that I wouldn't be allowed to do any substances or smoke if I was going to be around him. It was no issue because I never did anything like that before I met him anyway. When he picked up my prescription before we left the hospital, and he saw the medication I would be taking and told me, "You can't have this," then we had a whole argument about it before we even left the hospital. His point was I could just take Tylenol, and that these things are addictive. I don't know anyone since I moved away pretty recently, so he's the only one who would be able to help take care of me, so I agreed. Not even a day went by and I was in so much pain, and I told him that I needed my medicine. He again started arguing with me, and we came to the agreement that he would hold on to them and give them to me when I needed them. Not what I wanted, but it seemed like a fair compromise. A little over a week later, now, my pain is getting worse and not better. I was only taking 2 a day, maybe 10 hours apart, but I was in really bad pain halfway through the day, so I asked him for my medicine, and he told me I can't have one until later when I usually take it. I told him I need it now because I was literally shaking in pain, and he told me, it's withdrawal and I'm becoming too dependent. At this point I'm getting pissed because I'm in pain and can barely stand, and he won't tell me where my meds are, so I start looking around for them, and the whole time he was yelling, "I'm not going to let this happen to you too. I won't let you fall victim like I did." Not only was he making me even more mad, but he was being so embarrassing with all the crazy stuff he was saying. I get that he doesn't want me to get addicted, but he barely even knows me. He ended leaving a couple hours ago, but not before telling me how grateful I'll be for him saving my life since he left. I'm guessing he took the medicine with him, so I'm not even bothering to look anymore. So now I'm sitting alone in my bed, dreading the fact that I'm gonna have to drive myself to the hospital.
Am I the asshole for letting my mother-in-law and sister-in-law find me and my husband's bedroom toys because I suspected they snooped in my drawers? My 27F husband, 32M, and I have been dating for 6 years and married for 4. We have a 3-year-old baby boy, and since we don't plan on having more children, I told my husband that I wanted to get my boobs redone because I wanted them more perky, and I had the surgery last year. My mother-in-law has always been sniffy because my husband is her only son. We've gone low contact over the years because she's overbearing with him and dismissing with me. Things got a little better when our baby was born, but after my surgery? It's like I wrote on my forehead, "Look at my boobs. I want to cheat on my husband." She's always implying that I did it for male validation. Yeah, your son's FFS, that I'll leave my husband, that I look like a hooker because I wear stuff that shows cleavage, that I could have gotten them a little smaller, everything. She also complained about my clothes and underwear a lot, because no married woman with a child should dress like this. And see, that's what stung me, because how could she know? I suspected she was going in my drawers, but my husband told me that she could never. She made a comment about a cute set of lingerie that shows basically everything, and I was confused. I asked how she knows I have it, and she said she saw it in the washing machine, but I prefer to wash my sets by hand so the lace lasts longer. Anyway, we recently changed our bedroom and I had an idea to put an end to this. When I was restocking my drawers, I used one in my vanity to put all of my husband's and mine's bedroom toys, a few sets, and a dirty letter he wrote to me once. My mother-in-law visited us a few times and said nothing, so I did feel bad for accusing her, but yesterday she was here with my sister-in-law, and my husband and I were in the kitchen cooking for them. We heard my mother-in-law calling us, and when we went to our room they were standing next to my open drawer. I just snorted, looked at my husband and said, "See? She snoops." My husband got red in the face, berated my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law, and they both left after calling me indecent. My husband is mad at them, but he's mad at me too because he says I shouldn't have set a trap for his family and is saying we three need to apologize to each other. So am I the asshole?
What facts do you know about the UK that when you explain to people, they don't believe you? Every year, children make life-size dolls of a terrorist, which we burn on top of huge fires while setting off fireworks to celebrate catching and torturing him. There are 3 million people trapped in flammable defective flats, and the government are forcing loans onto the flat owners to protect developers that built them. Edinburgh is west of Bristol. 21% of houses in the UK are over 150 years old. It's not uncommon to find people living in houses that predate American independence. There is only one official language in the UK, and that is Welsh in Wales. Others may be de facto or recognized, but only one official de jure. Rabbits, chickens, pheasants are not native to the UK, but are now everywhere.
People who were gifted in elementary school, what are you doing in life now? Cashier. I can count your change like a mother though. I crawl around in sewers, ducts, manufacturing facilities, and research facilities to calibrate, repair, and certify atmospheric monitoring equipment, and I drink more than I should. I design touchscreen remote controls and the software that runs on them for a living. Remember when you were in algebra in school and you asked, when am I going to use this? It's me, I'm the one. I use it every single day. I was a little gifted. Now I'm a college librarian. When my kindergarten teacher told my father I had a lot of potential, my father replied, are we talking about the same kid?
I accidentally pooped the bed in front of my boyfriend. Warning. Don't listen if you have any problems with feces and that kind of shit. Pun intended. Me, F18, had just gotten in a relationship with my new sweet boyfriend, M20. A little info about me. I have a chronic stomach wound which pops up whenever I'm really stressed. The relationship was very new, so we were both still quite shy. We had just gotten comfortable enough farting in front of each other though, and often made a joke out of it. About a month into our relationship I had to go to the hospital with my stomach wound. I was there for a week and he was super supportive the whole time. When I finally got home from the hospital my body was so weak, I wasn't allowed to drink or eat anything the whole week because of the tests they had to make. Therefore my body had pretty much shut down, nothing had come in, so nothing came out. I got prescribed some laxatives that I took, never having taken them before. I didn't know what to expect, but it definitely wasn't this. We were laying in bed, I was on my side looking at my phone, and he was half sitting up in bed playing RuneScape on his laptop in front of me. I could feel a fart coming, so I looked up into his eyes with a smirk face expression and said, I'm shitting. I meant to say I'm farting, but the words came out wrong. And so did something else. The moment I said it, I let it all out, still with a smirk face expression looking him right in the eyes. You could hear a wet bubbly sound. And I instantly knew what had happened. My smile faded and my face turned to horror. My hand flew down to stop the flow, but it was too late. Boyfriend jumped up and ran to the toilet to bring me paper. He helped me clean up while just laughing hysterically. I was so embarrassed that I couldn't even say anything. Later when we sat and talked, he told me that it was the most intimidating thing he had ever experienced. The way I looked right into his eyes, he had never felt so dominated in his life. Like a monkey shitting in its hand and throwing it. Needless to say, we got very quickly comfortable with intimate things like that after this. Even though we've broken up since then and it's been a few years, I'm to this day still just as embarrassed.
I am 1.5 feet taller than my wife. So when I take a shower I make sure to set the shower head as high as possible. Then when she gets in she can't reach it to lower it and she has to call me in. So I get to see her naked. She has yet to realize that setting is too high for even.
My boyfriend said that I need to learn a lesson for not listening to him. I met my boyfriend Liam 5 years ago during an after-school project. We became really close friends and started dating 1 year ago because he told me that he's had feelings for me for a long time and wanted to take things to a romantic level. And I really liked him too, so we went out on a romantic date and everything went great. A few months ago, he told me that he feels really uncomfortable with me skateboarding and said that he wants me to stop because he was afraid I would get hurt. Skateboarding has been one of my hobbies that my big brother got me into since I was a little girl, and there was nothing that would deter me from doing it. It's one of those things in life that makes me happy and exhilarated. Earlier this week, I broke my leg and got a grade 3 concussion while attempting a new trick on the skateboarding ramp. I'm still in the hospital and my boyfriend has refused to come visit me. He said that he warned me and that I need to learn my lesson for not listening to him so that next time I will obey him because he's always right. My best friend and my family have all visited me and my mother and big brother have stayed in the hospital with me most of the time. And, I get it. I didn't heed his warning, but could he have at least come see me and ask how I'm doing? Shouldn't he still care? I found a note my girlfriend left in my closet before she moved away. Me and my boyfriend have been long distance for a year due to school as well. We started off in person. I'm not going to lie and say it gets easier with time, it doesn't. You learn to accept some things. Like I had to learn to handle my bad days without him and an encouraging hug. It's going to really suck the first few months and feel almost impossible. Sometimes your brain entertains the bad what ifs about your relationship. But the thing we've done that helps is we have shared playlists for each other. He updates mine every so often and I update his every so often. We read books together and we try to never miss our reading time. We try to find games that have cross-play to have a game night. We also communicate extensively about our feelings and any doubts and fears. At first we were apprehensive because we thought it could cause problems, but we found out that most of the time we felt the same way. We felt equally lonely and equally scared about how long distance would change our relationship. Always talk every day, even if it's just to send a meme. Even if your eyes can only open to the size of a grain of rice to text her, do it. This is your main source of showing affection, care, and concern. This is one thing that I wish we would have followed through with. There's wearable devices for long-distance couples to send a heartbeat or different things to your partner's wearable device. I would seriously consider investing in that. It allows you to still keep some semblance of random touches and affection, which you deeply desire at certain points. I wish you all the best. I'm also available for moral support or advice. I hate working with my intellectually disabled coworker. I am a baker at a busy place and one of my coworkers is intellectually disabled. This girl cannot keep up with anything. I have had to start batches over because she doesn't do things when they are supposed to get done. I ask her to do something that should take a maximum and 30 minutes later it's not done and too late to do it now because the pastries are too cold. She seems to just meander from task to task doing jack all when there are a million things to get done that are part of her job. I am constantly picking up slack when she is working with me, essentially doing the job of 1.5 people. Because of this, there have been numerous instances where a batch has had to get thrown out because it was in the proof for too long because I was busy doing her job. She is just so slow. Yesterday someone ordered donut holes but I hadn't done them yet, so I quickly threw them in the fryer, glazed them, and asked her to bag them up while I finished the rest of the customer's order. When I looked at her she was still bagging the donut holes, putting them in the bag one at a time. I'm at my wit's end. Just now I had to throw out a bunch of donuts because she didn't toss them in a cinnamon and sugar mix while they were warm. A very quick and easy task. And when I asked her to toss the new batch I watched her struggle to put on the plastic gloves, take a few seconds to stare at the plastic glove she dropped on the floor, watched her slowly walk the glove over to the trash can, miss the trash can, stare at the glove for a couple seconds again, finally pick it up and put it in the trash, slowly walk over to the donuts, pick two up and rub them together, and then drop them in the cinnamon and sugar mix one at a time. It's gotten to the point where as soon as I'm open the door to let her into the shop I get mad as soon as I see her face. I feel like a horrible person, but she's driving me nuts so I kind of don't care if it makes me ableist at this point. I don't want her to get fired because that may be discrimination, but she can't handle the tasks at this place. I've given her pointers multiple times on how to be more efficient, but to no prevail. My girlfriend's morning routine turned me into an early bird and made me realize she's the one I want to marry one day. So I, 21 male, moved in with my girlfriend Rachel, 20 female of 2 years about 3 months ago. Now I am in no way a morning person and dread waking up any time earlier than 12 or 1 if I can help it. We both work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I like having the same schedule as her, but I hated waking up at 7 or 8 every day. So before I moved in with her, I normally spent my weekends sleeping until 2 to 3 in the afternoon. My girlfriend is also not a morning person and has had a hard time waking up in the morning most of her life until she started working at her current job. She still hates it, but she says it's easier than it used to be. The first week after I moved in, she would wake up after about 3 alarms where it would take me about 7 or 8 nurses to wake up. But by the time I woke up, she had already showered and made coffee. Then the weekend rolls around and Saturday morning Rachel gets up at around 10 and I was half awake for long enough to check my phone before going back to sleep. I woke up again around 11 because Mother Nature was calling and I heard Rachel singing because I was still asleep. She was singing quietly so she wouldn't wake me. I came out of the room and saw her playing Minecraft with one earbud in the house. Smelled like coffee. She just looked up, smiled, said good morning, and then went back to playing. Next morning, same thing. I was more conscious this time because I recognized her voice in my sleep and was semi-awake. Every weekend morning she would do the same thing. Wake up around 10, sometimes even 9, make coffee and play Minecraft for a few hours while singing quietly so she wouldn't wake me around the third week. I found myself waking up at 10:30 or 11 and laying in bed just to listen to her sing and get frustrated while playing around week 5. I was waking up and going in and sitting on the floor with her, just listening to her while drinking coffee and scrolling on my phone. Something about the smell of coffee, the morning light, her singing and being able to just lay next to her doing absolutely nothing was so peaceful that it made me look forward to the weekend mornings. I noticed it was easier to wake up during the week and we got into the habit of waking up at the same time. I would start making coffee while she showers and we would spend a little bit of time together in the mornings during the week as well. One morning we woke up and sat in the living room together and the sun from the window behind the couch was hitting her and it felt like I was in a movie. There's no other way to describe it. She lit up like an angel, and she was singing as always. I couldn't breathe, I swear. I knew right then and there. I was so deeply in love with her, I would do anything, and I wanted to spend my life laying on the floor next to her while she played Minecraft and sang. This woman single-handedly fixed my sleep schedule and made me fall in love with her by doing the same thing she did before I moved in, only with me. Update, am I the a-hole for telling my mom I don't care that her father was in the Holocaust? Pretty much. What happened after is my dad came home the day after and he got really upset with me because my mom was inconsolable. He told me about how we can't judge my grandfather like we could somebody else who acted like him who hadn't gone through what he'd been through. He told me how my grandfather had never said a nice thing about him but he still loved him because he wouldn't have had my mom without him needing to survive. He told me that I need to see the good that comes from everything. I didn't really know what to say but Uncle Levi was still over so he talked to me and Mom. He told me how relatives who survived the war or were living in different countries always talked about my grandfather like a different person than he knew. Like he loved motorcycles, wanted to be a mechanic and wanted to see the pyramids and was always doing things to make his first wife happy. But Levi told me that he really only remembers my grandfather from when they moved to a city called Stanislav. He told me that he can barely speak the Sint language because he remembers how much my grandfather pushed for them to assimilate and learn Ukrainian even though he was little but they faced a lot of discrimination there too. According to him, that's what really broke my grandfather because it was like they still hate us even after what they did to us. So when they moved to Canada was when he really changed and Levi said he always regrets leaving because it gave him issues that made him put his own life on hold, to the point where he only had kids because somehow he married a woman in her 40s who was able to He said that my grandfather acted that way because he thought it was better to push people away so that when he was gone, people wouldn't miss him like the way he missed his own parents and first wife. My mom then tried to remind me of things that my grandfather did for me, like he'd always go and buy me X-Men comics and movies because Magneto was the only real superhero, and how he'd always drive me to school, how he'd use his pension to buy me things. And I had honestly forgotten or just stopped thinking about a lot of that. She insisted that he did love me even if he didn't show it. I don't really know what to feel, but I didn't want to make my mom sad, and maybe Uncle Levi is right about why he was so mean, and maybe my dad is right about there being good in everything. So I said sorry, and I told my mom that I won't act like that again. She hugged me and gave me a lot of kisses on the forehead, so I think we're cool now because she's been happier these last 2 weeks.
My golden child sister gave me a card congratulating me on becoming her surrogate. Now, my parents are telling me for family, you take risks, when I told them that I can't because of heart disease. I have an older sister, Mary. Mary has always been my parents' favorite, and growing up, they idolized her because of her looks, grades, she was athletic, and more. She is described as my parents' golden apple baby, and I, on the other hand, was both 2 years later as an accident. I was also born prematurely with a heart condition, and growing up, I was in and out of the hospital receiving countless surgeries. My parents always threw in my face that I was draining their money, even though my grandparents always paid for anything insurance didn't cover. She never hid her hatred towards me. She'd constantly bully me, and my parents did nothing about it. When I graduated high school, I had enough. I begged my grandparents to pay for me to go to a college state away, just so I could get away from her. That was the best decision ever because that's where I met my now husband Greg. Greg was a sweetheart. He always made me feel beautiful no matter what size I was. After graduating, we ended up getting married, which his family paid for because my parents refused, stating they spent too much on my sister's wedding a year prior. They also said that they already spent too much on me when I was a child because of my heart condition. Not only that, they didn't even bother to attend the wedding. We ended up choosing to live in the city we graduated in. Because of all the things that had happened and all the hatred I had with them, I rarely talked to my family back home outside of my grandparents. Greg and I later would have a son together, but this was a high-risk pregnancy. I was advised to terminate early on as the results could be fatal. Luckily we both made it, but I almost didn't though. The amount of strain it put on my heart was detrimental. I was strongly urged by doctors to not have any more children, and we agreed. Fast forward to about 1 month ago, my family and I moved back to my hometown, after my grandpa's health was declining and I wanted to be near him. As soon as I moved back, my parents and sister started acting very nice to me. My mom would ask me how I was doing and tell me how proud she was of me, which is something she never does. My sister would join and do the same. I knew something was up, but my grandmother said to give them a chance and maybe they missed me. 2 weeks later I was invited to my parents' house for a family dinner. While at the table, my sister said she had a present for me. She whipped out a card and I opened it expecting it to be an apology letter. But no, to my surprise it was a letter stating that my sister found out she was infertile and congratulating me on becoming her surrogate. I was floored. I told her that I could not have her baby. I tried to explain what my pregnancy did to my body with my heart, and she started crying. My parents began screaming at me for being selfish and not wanting to help out my sister. I explained that doctors instructed me no, but they said for family, you take risks. I couldn't believe it. I grabbed my husband and stormed out.
What was the snobbiest thing you've seen a customer do in a restaurant? My horrible former sister-in-law was a world-class snob. Once, I was unfortunate enough to go to a diner with her and a couple of other family members. First, she made a fuss about where she sat in the diner, forcing the hostess to move us twice, and she wasn't nice about it. The waitress dropped off menus, and within seconds, my sill managed to knock the glass ketchup bottle to the floor. A passing bus person saw what happened, and dropped off another bottle of ketchup on her way by, on the opposite side of the table, no doubt planning to grab the other one when she came back the other way. This of course wasn't good enough for Sil. She tissed loudly, and for some reason, moved the ketchup bottle to where the previous one had been. Then she somehow knocked it over too. It fell onto the first bottle, and they both broke. Ketchup splashed all over Sil's shoes, as well as my mother's. Sil shrieked, and proceeded to blame the bus person for being too lazy, her words, to pick the first bottle up from the floor. Then she stood there, snapping her fingers, demanding the mess be cleaned up and threatening to sue for the cost of her shoes. Well, I had been putting up with her BS for several hours that day, and I'd had enough. I immediately apologized for her rudeness and asked where they kept their cleaning supplies. Then I helped them to clean up the mess this and carrot percent had made. My outspokenness made me even less popular with her, of course, and my family members later informed me that I had been rude to Sil, but to this day, whenever I go to that diner, I get free pie. What's the most unexpected thing you've found in your home? Last year, my husband and I bought a house and started renovating the basement. We decided to take down a wall to make more room, and to our shock, we found a secret door that led into an untouched 1950s kitchen with all its original appliances. We were effing ecstatic because we both love vintage stuff. Whenever we have free time, we love going around antique shops and flea markets. This find was like a dream come true for us. Everything in the kitchen was in perfect condition, the oven still worked, the fridge was cold as hell, and the stovetop was functioning perfectly. The only downside was that there wasn't any sink. We asked our realtor about it, but he had no clue about this kitchen, so he assumed that the previous owners had added it without telling him anything about it. Since there wasn't any sink, we figured they probably didn't use it much either. To keep this amazing discovery to ourselves, we decided not to tell anyone else about it so they wouldn't come over all the time wanting us to cook for them, which neither of us wanted anyway. So far we've hosted 2 successful dinner parties, but there's been one problem. No garbage disposal. That meant after each party ended up having to take out all of our trash, which is kind of annoying, but whatever, at least nobody else knows about this place yet. But then yesterday when my husband threw away some chicken bones after dinner, he accidentally threw away something important too. Today I woke up early for class at 9 a.m. while my husband stayed home because he said his head hurt too much for him to go anywhere today, so I figured I'd check on him since he said he'd be working in the basement all day long anyway. When I got down there though, something seemed off. The door leading into our secret vintage kitchen was open. My husband wasn't anywhere inside, so naturally worry started creeping up on me until I remembered what happened yesterday when my poor hubby opened up a refuse bag but couldn't fit anything else in it cause there's no disposal here, so instead of throwing everything away like normal people do, he took some things out until everything fit inside again. And now all of the trash was scattered across our basement floor. My poor man spent hours crawling around on his hands and knees picking everything back up while dealing with pain from his headache until finally exhausted he went upstairs with ice packs on his head while I typed this story from his phone. Bosses of Reddit, have you ever fired someone and had them totally freak out? When I was a lead lifeguard at a large water park, this whole thing happened. We have this girl I'll call Bitchy Brenda. Bitchy Brenda always gave customers poop, and was a complete asshole to anyone who, God forbid, asked her a question, and more assholery if your question was one she perceived as dumb. The managers/lead guards, me included among this group, knew she was like this, and the other guards knew she was bad. They hated dealing with her. At the very least, she was rude. At her worst, she would take 25 minutes to rote from one spot to the next, when it would take around 5 minutes to have one person on break rotate and have the cycle continue until the guy going on break was actually sitting on break. At least once a day, someone, somewhere, somehow, would get a report from a customer that she had been rude or condescending to a guest. She had been reprimanded once for calling a customer fat, illiterate, and retarded for not knowing how to sit in a tube, and having trouble. We were nervous to fire her, because our park required at least 100 guards to staff the park on any given day, and this year we had only 196 guards hired. We were, sadly, short, and we had to keep her because there were so few others. Well, one day, she arrives about 45 minutes late, and since she is scheduled on that area, we have to compensate by adjusting the positions of the guards and removing people from non-necessary positions until a replacement can be found. When she does arrive, it turns out it's due to her wanting to get breakfast and coffee. I'm quite angry now. During that last hour, I've been trying to find a replacement to no avail. Well, she takes a position, and the rotation begins at its normal pace. At around 11:45, she's at the top of one of the rides, and this black family comes to the top of the ride and prepares to ready themselves. The ride, by its nature, requires a sort of mini lecture to learn how to ride, and the guards are trained to give a demonstration, and such. She apparently gave her spiel, and the family didn't understand because she had, as the family later told me, did a craptastic job at it. When they asked her politely to repeat it, she did, and then, before she was about to push the release button, she said, and this still shocks me to this day, effing dumbass N-words, can't pay attention to a effing word I say. And then she, according to the guests, told me that she mocked my race by saying what I said earlier in this sort of ghetto accent. So this woman and her husband are effing livid, and apparently, the people in line are shocked. They exchange pleasantries, and the woman tells her that she's going to find the manager. Bitchy Brenda replies, good, do it, if you can find him. I don't give a F. It's one less group of morons I have to deal with. While this is going down, I am eating lunch with some of the lifeguards who are on the break rotation. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice one of the deep guards, those who man the pools and bodies of water over 4 feet, pointing me out to a large group of people. I get this gut feeling something has passed. I expect a signal, but the group approaches me. It's the family. Excuse me, are you the manager? I'm the lead guard, so yes. Can I help? What the F is the matter with that lifeguard up there? Do you know how racist she is? I'm sorry? I say. Right now my mind is beginning to extrapolate what the F could have possibly happened up there. Your lifeguard, Bitchy Brenda, she called us retarded and the N-word. Yay man, that lifeguard is crazy. The father says. I facepalm. But now, I am done with this poop, and Bitchy Brenda has crossed the effing line. It was one thing to be late, but this could get us sued for discrimination, and slander, and can ruin our reputation. I called Joseph, our park manager, to get down here right now, over the radio. She is getting canned, right now, so God help me. I have no real intention of asking any questions to this family. Joseph can do that if he wants. I trust these guests. This is exactly the poop I expect her to do. Listen ma'am, this is frankly unacceptable. Damn right it is. I've called our park manager and he, and I, are going to personally deal with this. We do not allow this kind of crap. I know you are mad, but you can rest assured that I am livid right now. Please stay here until we can get this settled. Joseph arrives with 2 security guards. He knows about Bitchy Brenda, and has had more than his fair share of talks with her. He does not smile, but his demeanor is hidden, and I can sense he has secretly been waiting for a good excuse to fire her. So Joseph, the family, me and Robert, this lifeguard who has volunteered to cover for a bit, walk up to the top of the hill where the ride is. Brenda? Joseph asks. You want to tell us what happened? Oh look, you brought the manager. Brenda, Joseph says. What? Brenda says snidely, nothing happened. These stupid people didn't listen. What you said was racist and unprofessional. We do not tolerate this kind of behavior. What are going to do? Punish me? No, we're past that stage. You've been terminated. Get out of the park. F you. This is the stupidest joke I've ever heard. You don't got the balls to effing fire my ass. No Brenda, this is for real. I say, you are one of the worst people I've had the pleasure of having to work with. You showed up late, have been rude to customers, have screwed up the rotations more times than I can count, and have refused to help guests with basic customer service. This park is done with you, and we no longer want you on the team. Right, I am the most badass lifeguard. I think I can safely speak for the other guards that you are not as loved as you think you are. Get out now. Robert is going to be taking your place, on his break shift I might add. Make me. Okay, one of. The security guard says. Brenda, just get out before you make this worse for yourself. Robert says. You bitches don't have the balls. She says. Now, at this park, we had these big rental tubes that were essentially giant donuts, but about 5 feet across because we purposely overinflated them to ensure that they could handle the stresses of fat people and whatnot. But they weigh about 20 pounds and carry a lot of energy if they are tossed or thrown. Their bulk ensures that it can easily knock a person over, at the very least making them stumble. In the wave pools, they knock people over. Brenda grabs a rental tube that is lying nearby, where a family had set up a blanket and a picnic, and she twirls around and throws it and knocks Joseph over. Robert and I catch him before he falls onto the concrete, and the 2 guards stumble after her while scrambling to call the park police. She was caught 5 minutes later after she tried to get to her car in the employee lot. She was arrested for assault, battery and resistance of arrest. She never once came back, despite telling everyone while being arrested that she was gonna find Joseph and me and beat us up so bad that we'd be in the hospital forever. My girlfriend had a trio with other people. 19M. My supposed girlfriend openly told me of how she had a trio with a few seniors from our school. The story lasted for about 10 minutes as she graphically explained it like it was the best moment of her entire life. The only thing that was going through my mind at that time was the trying to figure out whether she was saying it with some kind of remorse or she was just happily telling me about her week. And the worst thing about it is that I pretended to enjoy the story cause I really didn't know what to do. But deep down I felt so immensely traumatized. I never really told her how much that story hurt me, so Elle just ignored her texts and calls for around 3 days. After those 3 days, I ended up sitting next to this really hot girl from the same class as me, and we never really talked that much. We just introduced ourselves and talked about music. My girlfriend, whom I had been ignoring, saw me talking to the other girl, and later that night she texted me calling me an asshole, claiming that I hurt her feelings by talking to the other girl. I am literally so confused with this whole situation. I'm not really messed up by it cause I'm sure Elle haven't done anything wrong, but part of me is kind of hurt. I guess.